Workshop to order. The time is 12 noon. I wish to welcome you to the Superintendent's Workshop being held at the Joe N. Idlet Jr. TEC. I ask that out of respect for everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with any board member, please give that to our Executive Assistant, Ms. Morey. We'll take a break every 2 hours, board members, and if you need one before then, please let me know. And just a reminder, board members, we are in a workshop, but please wait to be recognized before speaking. And before we begin this meeting, Dr. Moore, I'd just like to congratulate you and this district for wonderful graduation rates. Let's give them a round of applause, everybody. It is so great to see that, and our high schools did a great job, and you know, that's a K-12 working system when we do that, so thank you to everybody. And I think we'll go ahead and get going. So, Dr. Moore, please explain the purpose of this workshop and then start with our items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The intent of this workshop is to present items and receive feedback from the board, specifically items that will be coming before the board in an upcoming business meeting. As just discussed by Dr. Jones, graduation rates were released last Thursday afternoon. We didn't get a lot of notice that they were going to be released this early. Typically, it would be probably this Friday, but we were excited to receive them. And as you can see from the screen here, the state's overall graduation rate is 90, up from 89, so congratulations to us as a state. But when you look specifically here local, Indian River County is a graduation rate of 96%, and Sebastian Senior High School leading the way with a graduation rate of 98, and Vero Beach hanging in at a very solid 97%. And I hit the wrong button. As you were saying, Dr. Jones, graduation rate is a great indicator of the strength of a system. Typically, high schools have the graduation rate associated with them because that's ultimately where kids are graduating. But it is a K-12 approach in order to ensure every single child has the opportunity to walk across that stage. It's just not what happens in the classroom. Is it extremely important? 100%. But it is extracurricular activities. It is coaches. It is relationships. It is the clubs. It is the experience that someone engages in over the course of 12 years. So to go from 89 in 1819 to a graduation rate of 96 is something we all should be proud of. That is the fourth highest graduation rate in the state of Florida. The three counties that are in front of us are extremely small. Matter of fact, if you added all of their graduating classes up, it doesn't equal to our graduating class. So we're very, very proud of that. 96 was the graduation rate last year. Maintaining 96% is extremely hard and difficult to do. So we were glad that we actually did. When you look at 18-19 going into the end of last school year, 11% increase in black graduation rate, Hispanic a 14% improvement, white +5, students with disabilities +4, and economically disadvantaged students +11. So continuing to see minor improvements. When you're at 96, it's hard to see improvements. It's about maintaining the area where you're at, and we are happy to produce those outcomes. So now we jump into ensuring these graduation rates stay exactly where they need to be in the coming years and continue ultimately to grow. As we engage in the initial conversation, kind of the kickoff of what will be our upcoming strategic plan. So as a reminder, we are in the closing year of a 5-year strategic plan. So we created this initial strategic plan in the midst of the pandemic. It is, in my mind, one of our innovative keys to our success, one of the innovative things that we're doing. When creating that strategic plan, I wanted to be very intentional because I was new to the system of modeling accountability. When I say modeling accountability, making sure I was giving or showing to our principals that I'm going to hold myself accountable to what's absolutely the most important. So we created a unique connection between my evaluation and the district strategic plan. My evaluation, in large part, is the annual outcomes that is approved by this board. which is very, very bold and courageous. We could have gone with a strategic plan that says conduct X number of professional developments, attend X number of community events. Though this is an outcome-driven strategic plan, and it's 100% linked to my progress or evaluation. Areas that we have been already engaged in this creation of our upcoming strategic plan is to take additional looks at early childhood education / interventions, focus on innovation and leadership, which is an ongoing conversation that we have collectively pushed forward over the last several months. Now, I've been talking a lot about innovation and redesigning what public education looks like. In our last workshop, we had a conversation with the board and looking at moving much faster. And I say much faster, when we look at data, we probably do that faster than anybody else. We make decisions as close to kids and as faster than any other system probably in the state, if not the nation. But I challenged principals during our December meeting based on the conversation we had at this meeting. Every month I have the opportunity to engage with principals where it's just the principals and myself. And I challenged our elementary principals to look at their facilities, look at their space, and say, if you can figure out a way to move to a K-8 school, a middle school, which, as you all know, we lose kids from 5th to 6th. The data is extremely clear, and if we know that now, we shouldn't create a plan to address it in 2 years if we can, in fact, address it going into next school year. So we have a number of schools who are proposing to me to propose to you, and this probably will come in our January board meeting, to shift them from a elementary K-5 space to a K-8 school over the course of the next 3 years, phasing in 6th grade, 7th grade, and then 8th grade. These schools are engaging with us now to validate these plans in order to ensure it is feasible. It doesn't come at a cost to the district. We can use current facilities across our system in order to accommodate this. So this is very, very exciting. Fellsmere Elementary School is in this to win it. They want to offer 6th grade next year and then transition 7th and 8th in the following years. Pelican Island, as you know, we have already approved to move into 6th grade. The feedback from the staff as they're going and engaging in their training around the classical model is, hey, we don't need to wait a year. We can add 6th grade next year. So we'll be coming in saying, can we add 6th grade to Pelican next year as well? Osceola Magnet School also believes that they can move to a 6-8 space over the course of the next 3 years. And then Rosewood as well is putting together a plan or a proposal to consider to make that a K-8. So in my mind, this is extremely exciting. It causes us to identify some known unknowns, because we'd have to, in the upcoming school year, evaluate the impact of our middle school spaces. We don't know what the impact would be if we offer a 6-8 in each of these 4 schools. What is going to be the overall impact in our middle school spaces, our 6th grade space? Because obviously, if 6th graders are staying in their elementary school, they're not going to a middle school. But that would allow us the time to evaluate that and then create a plan with staff to make recommendations to you early next school year to ensure that we have a solid plan in place in terms of elementary school, K-8 spaces, middle school offerings, as well as high school offerings, keeping in mind we have that boutique high school. So that is information specifically, or focusing that conversation around identifying elementary schools. We think we would start with those 4 specifically, and bringing a recommendation to provide the choice, the opportunity for a parent to say, I would like my son to have the choice of remaining at a elementary school, transitioning to a K-8, or I would like for them to have the choice to attend a traditional middle school experience, and then vetting out what the curriculum, what the design would look like, so it's very clear. So we are in the exploration of that as well. Additionally, continuing to look at our technical education, some of our plans that we have created to ensure that we have a true programs of study that takes students through and to our technical centers, maximizing career technical education opportunities and maximizing opportunities for school choice and programming through a very specific and articulated process. The Boutique High School, which we just kind of referenced, would be embedded into our upcoming strategic plan. And then retention of students and families, also all areas that our strategic plan should address in the upcoming year. When you look at the overall planning timeline, as I've met individually with all board members, this isn't a one and done process. This isn't just a workshop process. This is an ongoing conversation with the board every month until this plan is ultimately created. Ultimately creating this feedback loop where we'll be doing specific things as staff, going out and conducting workshops, getting feedback from teachers, from staff, from community, from parents. We'll begin drafting in April and March. But as staff receives that feedback, we'll be able to bring that information back to the board and let them know any shifts or changes or considerations the board would like us to evaluate as we move through. So we're creating a feedback loop between each of the steps of the creation of the strategic plan with the board. So we're excited about doing this over the course of the month, over the course of every month. And then additionally, ensuring that as we have this conversation, we're also talking about the financing of this plan. You can create the world's greatest strategic plan, but ultimately you need to be able to fund it. So at the alignment of our budget process, you'll see similar conversations taking place with our budget as we move forward, ensuring that we're kind of shifting or changing our behaviors to ensure that we're financing a plan based in the reality of public education that ensures we are, A, being aggressive and going after and marketing for our students, but ultimately ensuring that we maintain our high financial accolades that we received over the last several years. Our current areas of focus, and I'm going to transition over to Dr. Jacobs, who will go over some of this information, and I'll pass the clicker down to you. But this is the 5 areas that we agreed upon in our current strategic plan: academic success, safety, culture, and climate, communication and engagement, talent development and support, as well as organizational and fiscal responsibility. It's important to note, before I give it over to Dr. Jacobs, everything is flexible within our strategic plan. Even some of these areas have changed in title and grouping over the course of the last 5 years based on the reality of the system, feedback from our community, and most importantly, feedback from our board. So as we agree upon something at the end of this process over the summer, doesn't mean that it will be solidified or put in, we may change based on our reality, or we may push ourselves to go even farther or move faster based on what we've accomplished in a shorter time period than we anticipated. Okay, Dr. Jacobs.
So essentially, the information that I'm about to present is a first step in taking a deep look at the current structure of our district strategic plan in anticipation of creating our next cycle of our strategic plan from 2025 to 2030. So as you can see, we have the 5 focus areas. That really serves as one of the anchors within our district strategic plan to align our strategies and targets and to have very clear communication of what our strategic priorities are that we have collectively decided upon. So in previous sessions, we talked a lot about innovation and leadership and how incredibly important both of these areas are going to be as we move forward through the next 5 years. And so as we're looking at this, I think it's important that we really consider how are we going to integrate both innovation and leadership into our upcoming cycle of the district strategic plan. In thinking about this, innovation can be aligned to academic success. So a lot of the innovation work that has been discussed at workshops and board briefings is related directly to the academic success of our students and the school models that we offer across our district continuum. The next area that we see really aligned to this is that if we are going to be organizationally and fiscally responsible, we're going to need to innovate. We're going to need to learn faster. We're going to need to use our fiscal resources more efficiently. And so those two areas seem to clearly align to the area of innovation. So your student experience, what learning solutions you're offering, as well as how we reimagine teaching within the classroom to increase student engagement and interest in our curricular offerings. The next area, leadership, we're really looking at talent sourcing. How do we most effectively draw high potential talent to the school district of Indian River County? If we're going to sustain the outcomes that we have realized over the last few years, we have to have a strong leadership bench who can carry on the systems and processes that have been developed in order to drive continuous improvement. The next piece is leadership pipeline. So the leaders that we already have here, how are we cultivating their knowledge and skills so that they can continue to move forward in various leadership positions? And then finally, executive stewardship. So by that, I really mean that those leaders that we have in cabinet and senior level positions, how are they mentoring and really investing in the leaders and teachers that we have here in order to ensure that we have healthy succession planning? So when you look at leadership, really talent development and support obviously is very clearly aligned to that area. And then also academic success. So again, going back to whether we're going to be able to, that we are going to sustain the progress that we have been making. So in thinking through this, I also wanted to share another kind of conceptualization of how we could align it. So we could either move innovation under academic success and organizational and fiscal responsibility into the existing focus areas, and then leadership under talent development and support and academic success. Or another way to look at this is really, if we say that innovation and leadership are our priorities, wouldn't it be important to have all of the different areas fall under innovation? So not only are we innovating in academic success, but our safety, our culture and climate, we're finding the very best technology in order to keep our students and our school campuses safe. In communication and engagement, we are using the latest technology in order to reach the broadest number of people. Talent development and support, really equipping our teachers, staff, and leaders with the skills and knowledge that they're going to need in order to prepare our students for the future jobs that don't exist yet. And then organizational and fiscal responsibility. What are the tools, what are the processes that we need to use in order to maximize our fiscal and our staff resources? And then the same kind of thought about leadership. So leadership is important to all these different areas, academic success, whether you're talking about safety, whether you're telling the story about the district, whether you're providing professional learning, and then finally, leadership for organizational and fiscal responsibility. So with that, we wanted to get some initial feedback from board members on number one, the 5 focus areas that we already have established in our current district strategic plan, and then thoughts about how to integrate innovation and leadership into our upcoming district strategic plan.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Ms. Berenborg and Dr. Posca first, so I don't forget you. So Ms. Berenborg, any comments on the presentation with our strategic plan, or any ideas on what Dr. Jacobs just asked?
Yeah, sorry. I look forward to the fact that we're being so innovative and creative with everything, and I look forward to future conversations about this. We've had some initial conversations, but I'd like to hear from other board members as to what they think as far as the initial thoughts of how to move forward with this plan. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Dr. Posca?
No, I appreciate the presentation, and obviously it sounds like there's a lot of room for flexibility based on how things go, and innovation is kind of the cornerstone of what we're going to be working with here. So I'm interested to see, how quickly we can develop some of these K through 8s. And just kind of see where this goes and follow up over the next couple months.
Thank you, Dr. Posca. Ms. Rosario?
Okay, so thank you for the initial beginnings of this discussion. I really like, Dr. Moore, that we are going to have a placeholder for strategic planning in all of our meetings moving forward. I think that's incredibly important for us as a board, because the strategic plan is the board plan. The strategic plan is not the superintendent plan, it is the board plan. So that's why I think the board should take this very seriously, because it is through that plan that we then have the superintendent work, day to day to reach the goals that are within the plan. Clearly, we're working together on this effort, so I think it's really, really important. I also like the idea that you mentioned budget alignment with the strategic plan. Now that we are just beginning, and I know that Mr. Green is probably just also beginning the process of working on our budget for the next year, I would like to see a little bit more of that. I would love to see part of, take back, I would love to see a placeholder for budget as well, specifically regarding how it would align with our strategic plan, as you mentioned before, but also how it would help for board members to be engaged in the process of our budget, so that come the time that we have to approve our budget in the summer, we are well versed in it. If we had any questions, we don't have to wait until the last minute to say we haven't been a part of that process. So I think it would be really, really important if we could get into the habit of doing something like that. So with regard to the question that is posed to us here, it would have been a little bit helpful if we had this presentation and knew what your questions were going to be for us to provide for you before today, because then we would have board members prepared to have that discussion. That said, I think one of the questions that you mentioned was, where should we have the areas separate and innovation separate, if I understood the question, or have them underneath all innovation? I think it should be the opposite. And here's my thought, because every area that we decide on has its own type of innovations. Academic innovations are going to be very different than talent innovations. What human resources does in terms of hiring and professional development or whatever, wherever it falls under, those innovations will look different than what happens in the classroom under instruction and curriculum. I think those are two very different areas. The same thing with facilities. How facilities and organizational structures work, their innovation would look quite different than all the others. Same thing with communication and engagement. So I actually think whatever the umbrella areas we select should have its own innovations specific to that area. So maybe our focus should be just on what those umbrella areas should be first. I do think that there is a critical place absolutely for academic success. That shouldn't change, where our focus is always on academic success. Umbrella area, I guess. I'm using umbrella like the big areas. Talent development and support, I think, is critically important. Safety, did I say safety? Safety, culture, and climate, also very important. I don't think that should change either. Community and engagement, I don't think that should change. I do have some suggestions on how to get there, because I think that we need to do better in that area still, even though we've come a long way from where we used to be. Same thing with organization. I think organization and fiscal responsibility, there are some areas in there that we have had conversations over the years where they're quite different. They really probably shouldn't be under the same category. But one area that I don't see here is the umbrella, and this is where it gets a little, I'm going to sound like I'm contradicting myself, unless you want to give it another name, is innovation as a separate umbrella, but not separate from the individual strategies of how each of those areas will become innovative. Does that kind of make sense? So like overall innovation might be a district, what is the district doing to innovate as opposed to what is curriculum and instruction doing to innovate in the classroom? And what I mean by that is what are we doing as a district to re-envision school organization, to re-envision maybe classical education might fall under that topic. Maybe creating more K-8 schools, as you mentioned, would fall under that particular umbrella. What other areas, what other things are we doing? Alternative school, maybe re-envisioning alternative school could fall under that umbrella. Another area that I don't see here that doesn't pop out that I would like to see would be a stronger focus on career and technical and vocational education. We have to do better there. We have a great college, career and technical education college, Treasure Coast Technical and Vocational College, but we're not doing a lot of focus on that school. I think we really need to focus more on that. Building our students academically, giving them opportunities to have dual enrollment participation in Treasure Coast Technical and Vocational, I think is incredibly important. And that might fall under that other kind of district innovation umbrella. Again, you can call it something else so we're not too confused. But I think those are the types of things, virtual education, well, that might be curriculum, but yeah, that's still an option when you're talking about school choice. Re-envisioning what school looks like could be under that umbrella that we don't have here. Trying to think of anything else and I can't think of anything else right now, but yeah, so I hope that you got my, as I'm thinking out loud, kind of brainstorming and thinking at the same time, if that makes any sense. And of course, I'll just, at this point, hand it over to board members.
Thank you. Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, could you put the slide back up that you had with the two areas, innovation and leadership there? Yeah, you know, one of the things that I've found in doing strategic plans corporately for many, many years is if you don't, let me start again. 2025 is much different than 2020. What was important in 2020 certainly is different today. And as you said, with the competition that we have with private schools and charter schools and homeschooling, there are things that are happening in education that were not here 5 years ago. And I think that what I have seen in a strategic plan is you don't try to fit it into neat categories. You really have to identify those things that you want to do. Now, you have to, all the issues that we have in the symbols, whether it's safety or finance or financial, and by the way, I agree with Ms. Rosario that the financial should be talked about in light of the strategic plan as we go along and not just in one great big 576-page budget package at the end. I think that is an excellent point, and I believe that's the way that we should do it. But if we don't point out the things that we believe are important for our success over the next 3 years, then they can get buried in all the other things that we do. And so I think trying to prioritize, and innovation, I think, is so key for our competitiveness, for reinventing schools, for everything that we do to be successful over the next 5 years. We have to have the innovation part and the talent and leadership part. How do we become schools, the school of choice for teachers? How do we become the school of choice for parents, or the schools of choice, I should say, by the options that we offer? I mean, to me, those are some of the big ideas. You know, the best performing, one of the things with teachers, the best performing district in the state also how to have the best compensated teachers in the state. and administrators. And I think we ought to do things that really support everything that we're doing, and that's why I think it's important in the budget that we separate the things that are nice versus the things that are necessary. And let's make sure that the budget is focused in places that are going to make a difference and really impact us. So that I certainly believe in, and I think this competitiveness is one of the big things. You know, I did that study 10 years ago with Florida Council of 100, 8 years ago. And it was well known at the time that the K through 8 model is the preferred model, really, for academic success. I mean, we only have to look at the middle school slide to see that kids come out of fifth grade 63% proficient, and they come out of sixth grade 43% efficient. This was data 18 months ago or so, but you know, maybe it's a little better one way or another now, but it's still a 20-point gap. There's a middle school slide. And I think that everything that you're doing with reinventing schools, with coming up with new ideas, is really important. And that's why, to me, innovation just really pops out as its own separate category. While other things are important, but the innovation, what are we going to do to really change the direction of schools and make this the schools of choice for parents, I think is the big deal. And certainly I would hope that we're going to focus on that.
Thank you. Just a few comments. Thank you, board members. Dr. Moore, I wasn't here in 2020 when the strategic plan was developed. I know you go out and talk to people, but is there a committee or parents together? How do you get true feedback if the parents can't get to these meetings?
So in the process, as we move along and kind of benchmark this out over the course of the next 7-8 months, we will have town halls, we'll have focus groups. Typically, focus groups gives us a lot of information and allows us to focus the conversation around the innovation. And clearly, our initial conversation is mostly about bringing innovation to the forefront, which is absolutely exciting to hear. If you just listen to the boldness in some of the statements board members are making, it gets you goosebumps, if that's, I don't know what y'all call them here, but it's exciting. So clearly, as we collect this information, we step back and say, okay, what did we hear? How do we organize these ideas? If we're able to come back in a month and say, all right, this is the structure of the plan, and these are the areas, give us feedback, board members. But I couldn't agree more. Innovation is at the forefront of this plan, and innovation is in every area within the plan.
And just a couple more comments. You know, being out there for choice, I mean, choice in the public school system can happen 100%. And I think this is leading the way. I really do. Because if we don't do it, it'll be done to us as far as losing students and so forth. Not only do we have a little bit of a middle school slide, we have a summer school slide. So we should maybe start looking at that too. I hate to say, okay, we're going to do this or this, but you could see a summer school slide for sure. Or summer slide, I'm sorry. And I like all of the components in our strategic plan. I've gone through this several times. I like the components, but I agree with what's been said here too. Somehow, whether it's innovation under each area or innovation at the top of all 5 areas, I think is important because, you know, obviously student achievement is our priority here, making sure that they're ready to go to the next level, whatever it may be. And of course, if we have the K-8, you'll be making a plan with, okay, that 6th grade's not going to middle school, how we will adapt to that. And I know that's future, but I think overall, as far as the strategic plan and its components, very good, but keep innovation out there in every respect because it's important.
Yeah, and as I digest the conversation, I tend to agree. There's innovation within each area, regardless of what those areas end up being. But we're really forcing ourselves to have the conversation around school design, school concept, start times, those, groupings, bells, those, that might be a separate area of innovation, or school design area, whatever we would call it, maybe a separate area.
And I just appreciate, I think most people will say, you know, this is our community. Let's look at it locally. How will it affect our students, our parents, our teachers, and community members? Very important.
And to me, that's one of our key areas of our success, is that this is a strategic plan that we want to be innovative, but ultimately, we are going to be innovative to create Indian River County's public education system for its community. So it's being hyper-focused in on the desire and wants of our community and designing that experience for them in order to ensure, A, we're meeting the community need. Our advocacy, a lot of times we think of advocacy and we think of going to legislators. We need to be advocating back towards our community
Right.
regarding the options and choice. So
Thank you.
better
Ms.
job
Rosa-
marketing.
I'm sorry. Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, so a couple of things that were said that I had a thought, because I kept struggling in my head with innovation, innovation, innovation. And really another word for innovation is transformation. And that is our mission, right? Transforming education to inspire students. So how about with regard, and because the district's focus is so different than what would happen within a school academically or within the finance, how about the district's umbrella would be called transformation, district transformation or transformation, or, something under transformation. Because that's what you're doing, is you are establishing goals to reach our mission, which is to transform education. And then underneath that would be how you are innovating to reach the transforming work. What are you doing to reach the transforming work of the district? And I'm just talking district here, if we were to add another category. If you could think about that, I think it would align certainly with our mission. You're smiling.
Well,
Why are you
it's-
smiling? You like it?
Selecting everything you said when you initially spoke regarding innovating
Right.
the system
Right,
and having innovation inside each strategic plan is kind of confusing. So maybe focusing in on the district innovation, whether it's I led a transformation office for 7 years, so I like that. So it is the redesign, repurposing, transformation of how we go about the business of educating kids.
yeah.
So there's a lot of thinking. It's exciting. It's good. It's good to have the conversation, but I think we've made a lot of progress.
And for the next meeting, can you please provide us
Yes.
with any, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg, Dr. Posca, any other comments?
Nothing right now, thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
Madam,
good.
oh, sorry.
I had one other
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry, Mr.
The one
Wright.
other thing that you said that I thought was great in the beginning is that when you look at a strategic plan, you have to have measurable results. It's really a lot of hard accountability to achieving the plan, and I think that you guys do a better job than, I would venture to say, than most districts anywhere of holding yourselves accountable for the results. And I want to make sure that in the words, we don't lose the emphasis on results. And what we do in strategic plan leads to a outcome that we want.
100%.
Good point. Okay, next item. I'm
Sorry.
sorry, Ms. Rosario.
That's okay.
I got left, right.
That's okay. And I just want to throw something out there, and we certainly don't have to have a long, drawn-out conversation about it, but just for a long-term thinking as a superintendent, think also about how to restructure your evaluation, because there are parts in our conversations over the years that there are parts of your evaluation, just the formatting of it, that doesn't allow for that
Yes.
doesn't allow for like other areas that we could provide feedback in that are incorporated within, the overall structure of communication, but not communication specifically with board members. Like, I just think.
I'm doing better though, right?
Yes, yes, sir. We have our ebbs and flows, but yes, definitely better. No, I don't mean it like that. I just mean just in the formatting of it. So as we move forward, it's certainly not a conversation for today's topic, but if you can kind of think about that, because it would help us as board members to be
I
able to
agree.
give feedback that is both subjective and objective.
I agree.
Thank you.
So if it's okay with the board, Mr. Teskey is here, and I don't like to have Mr. Teskey just sitting around because he is our safety and security individual. So if it's okay, we are now required, as you know, to have a update from our safety specialist on a quarterly basis. So Mr. Teskey is here to provide that update, and I'm sure he'll say it, but we also have a closed session coming up early February as well. So this might be a good time to transition some topics or conversations for that closed session. Mr. Teskey.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Good afternoon, Cabinet, board members, board chair, and our board members remote. Happy New Year to everyone. It's good to see everyone again. So according to House Bill 1473, Rule 6A, quarterly updates will be provided to the board in a public setting. So here we are again. We had our previous update back in October. What a day that was, because we were prepping, of course, for the storms and the hurricane. So we were very busy at that time. I don't think there's any storms out there today, so I think we'll be able to get through this quick and fast for you. So if you wouldn't mind, please, like we do in our closed sessions, I'm going to read through my bulleted points to you, and then we can address questions or concerns at the end, of course, if we can discuss them due to confidentiality. But I'm just going to move through some talking points and some updates for us. So since our last audit update back in October, I have finished the door and gate exemptions at all of our schools and facilities. These have been updated within the FSAT portal, and any changes that have to be made to those exemptions have to run through me. The Office of Safe Schools gives me a year to have them done. We had them done by the winter break. So we're very proud of our principals and APs working with me to get that done. The threat assessment protocol has been updated, and it will continue to evolve based upon changes, but we have a district-wide template in place that will improve the consistency of the reporting and the record keeping for all threat assessment data. All principals and assistant principals have created a resource guide with the help of Cabinet and myself and all the fine people you see sitting here in front of you. We've created what we call an Office of Safe Schools compliance binder, but I call it the battle book. So it's basically grab it, go, do your walk, do your tour, or at any time your administration should be able to reference that battle book to answer questions when an auditor or an inspector shows up. It should be easily accessible and available at all times for administration to use. Protocols are in place for updating that battle book, those documents weekly, at a minimum monthly, and corrective action for deficiencies has been addressed from the last inspection, and progressive discipline has been imposed as necessary, which is a requirement. Happy to report all of our school administrators have completed the required Cessor.org training. Those certificates are on hand. Emergency drill compliance has been addressed with a mandatory schedule being programmed and noted within the Raptor Drill Manager platform. Basically, reminders are being set. Myself, the school safety specialist, I have conducted, as of this morning, 62 official audits to our schools and facilities, public and charter, 62 since August. And specific plain language protocol has been put in place for completing after-action reviews. We had a wonderful training last Tuesday with all of our SRDs and SROs here in the TEC, and I myself updated them on the new House bill language for the after-action review requirements. So the official quarter two update as follows. We had one school that had a real-world AED incident and Raptor alert was not activated. The after-action review was updated afterwards. We reestablished protocol with the school office staff and administration, and progressive discipline was imposed. We found one open classroom door at one of our charter schools in November. This was documented in FSAT by me. I conducted the re-inspection that was completed, and progressive discipline was imposed from the charter school administration to their employee. Overall, district-wide, I was finding hard corners in safe areas were lacking deep labeling or signage postings. I've met with every school administrator and done a safety walk at every single school to ensure that these are rectified and corrected. So hard corners and safe areas are also now being referred to, as of last week, safe spaces, safe space. So not to confuse anyone out there, but Some of our state inspectors may be referring to them as safe spaces on top of what we've already had in place. We had some food and nutrition cafeteria staff located at a charter school not participating in a live scheduled drill. That was observed by myself. During the active assailant drill, the FNS staff was just continuing to work, and as we all know by code, that is required for all employees in the school to participate and assist. So progressive discipline was imposed since those food service employees do work for us and push out to the charter schools, and I will be re-inspecting them next week at their next drill to ensure that staff are doing it correctly now. 2 of our schools were not complying and completing their emergency drills on time within the 30 to 45-day window for November and December. So I met with both school administration, met with the persons who are in charge of drill manager. We've created assignments for them in Canvas to ensure that they do not miss their deadlines, and progressive discipline was imposed for both of those schools. As mentioned before with our school resource deputies and officers, after action review forms are have become very detailed and are audited and inspected, and color codes need to disappear, and we need specificity with drill language. So we can no longer just simply put a code yellow or a code red. We must actually name the specific drill on the after action review. So we built new protocol in place with each principal, and we are reviewing each form before they are submitted to the state and put into the binder. I would like to end with Q2 noted improvements. So we have seen an improvement with increased Raptor alert, whether it's on the phone or the desktop. We're seeing increased uses of the Raptor kiosks at the front offices. Everyone is being Raptored in. I'm sure if you, as board members, if you're visiting the schools, they're holding you in place until you are Raptored in. So we're seeing an excellent improvement. It is required by law, but it is a best practice. As far as the after-action review forms, our law enforcement agencies are doing an outstanding job capturing details and documenting them to a very high level. So I wanted to give a nice shout out to all of our 3 law enforcement agencies who are completing those evaluations for us. So we're seeing a reduction in the number of schools not meeting drill timelines. So remembering back to October's quarterly update, I gave you the 22-23 data, and we had 7 schools who were tardy with their drills, remembering that they completed them, but the timeline, the Office of Safe Schools, was not pleased with. So we're down to 2 now, the 2 that I just mentioned. So we're seeing an improvement there, but we still have work to do until we get to 0, none of our schools. And our work order system has just been stellar. It's been outstanding. I have to give a shout out to the physical plant, Director Michael and Bob Dunton, whether it's tree trimming, repairing gates, doors, locks, outstanding response from the physical plant to ensure that these areas are repaired and in place properly before we become inspected from an auditor. At this time, I'll take any questions, but just remembering I can't be too detailed. This is open to the public. We will be meeting February 10th for the closed session here, but I will stand by for any questions or comments. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Mr. Teske. Dr. Posca, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the update, Mr. Teske. And I'll just start by saying that I don't feel that the current state of affairs in this country is really business as usual right now. I think there's an increased threat really across the country. Obviously, there's no real specific threats to our area, but I think this is a good reminder that we need to take safety and security very seriously at all times and to put that into practice. Obviously, we can't go into detail about specific projects or things that we may want to do. But I'll say generically, as we do pretty much whenever we discuss safety and security behind closed doors or in private meetings, that we have several years of plans of upgrades, and in my mind, these are all things that have to be done. And the sooner we do them, the better off our children and our community is going to be and safer. So I would recommend moving up the timelines for really any safety and security project we can try to fit into the budget, and potentially move other things down the line that could wait. And then finally, just to add on as a follow-up to our prior conversation and continuing to look at, I would say, maybe a change in our protocol to how we handle drones, getting ahead of what I would identify as a known threat that eventually we're going to be facing here. So instead of just allowing drones to watch us in airspace that they're not supposed to be in, to have effective and relatively safe ways to eliminate them.
Thank you, Dr. Posca. Ms. Berenborg?
Yes, thank you. I agree with moving safety as a priority, always as a priority. And the concern I still have is prop doors, and I like the fact that we're talking about progressive discipline. It's important that people know that we take this very seriously. They need to take it seriously. Our kids need to be protected. And so that's the part where, when you hear about all the delayed fire drills or whatever drills that they're delayed, I have concerns about that because, having been a principal, I knew exactly how to do that, and it's real easy. So I don't know why we're not doing that. Just priority needs to be keeping the kids safe.
Thank you, Ms. Berenborg. Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate what Dr. Posca mentioned. It just so happens that we were talking about drones not long ago. I don't know, maybe about a month or two ago. And lo and behold, here you have this drone issue nationwide. So I think it's really important. And as the news was sharing, obviously, what everybody else is hearing over the news, who is in control of our airspace is so important. So I know you mentioned that it is up to the sheriff's department to handle local airspace. If there are any unapproved drones that are over our games specifically or over our schools, can you talk a little bit, whatever you can say publicly about that and what the plan is moving forward on that? I think that is really, really important nowadays.
Yes, ma'am. I do already have that on the closed session in February to have an in-depth discussion with law enforcement. They will be briefing you as well as us on their protocol that they can share with us.
Okay. There's a part of that I think needs to be public as well, especially with what is going on in the news. So we need to kind of figure out, maybe that's something for our attorney to kind of help guide, because we haven't decided anything, yay or nay, on either side. So I think having a full discussion of it is not going to violate any of our current policies or safety protocols, especially since we haven't established it yet. So I just think that in order for us as board members to be able to make the best decision, how do we approach our constituents with this topic? We need to be able to say, hey, here are all of the issues that we're facing. I understand that we're going to get a debrief from the sheriff and local law enforcement, which I encourage. But at some point, there has to be a broader discussion about this. We can have all of the policies in the world, even if we have policies now that establish what the protocol will be moving forward regarding drones over our schools and our sports arenas. But if our community is not aware of it, then how can anybody, move forward or tread lightly under those policies? It's kind of like, we don't want to set someone up for failure, even if it's someone innocent wanting to take pictures or something. I think those are some of the things that we need to kind of bring to light publicly without divulging whatever policies we eventually enact, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, thank you for the update. I was impressed that when you did find people in non-compliance that you're taking action. I think that's one way to get compliance. Certainly drills, although they may seem to people involved in them at times frivolous, it is unbelievably important when something actually happens. So I'm pleased that you're doing that. I just need to be updated a little bit, and perhaps we could get together before the February 8th so I could find out some of the things that will be discussed and get into it before that with you. But I am all for anything we do to keep the kids safe. And I think that, when we look at, again, budget priorities, that always has got to be at the top. So thank you for the update.
Thank you. Mr. Teske, how many more schools that are in need of the single point entry?
To date, they all have a single point of entry, but the Hardin vestibule, so our last count was 9.
Okay. And how many, I'm sorry, are being worked on this summer or as the school year begins?
Yes, ma'am, 2.
2, okay, all right.
Guys,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Dyer.
is that true with charter schools too?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
They all have a single point of entry required. Now, Hardin vestibule is separate from a single point of entry, which I can go into detail in February.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, sir. Different criteria.
And regarding the progressive discipline, I also agree with that. How many steps are there in progressive discipline?
It's changed since I was a principal,
Okay.
so I'm going to defer to
Much more
Ms.
aggressive.
Foley.
So depending on the situation, in general, progressive discipline starts with a warning, and then it goes to a documented verbal warning, a written. It can go to suspension with or without pay, and following that, termination.
Okay. I remember in the information, I think you said, Mr. Teske said this in October, some were late, but something with the timeline, and they didn't get it in time as far as the number of schools that had those, I guess, not following the protocol for our Code Red, Code Yellow, and so forth. But for the most part, they're all up to date on that, right, as far as how many drills they need?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. The number of drills have been met. The state and the Office of Safe Schools have 30 to 45-day requirements. And
Yes.
those schools, although they did the drills, they were out of those days.
That's right.
They've
Okay.
moved outside the window, which we need, out of the original 7, 2 as of this December, we're still out of compliance. So we've built those mechanisms in place to where they can't miss it now.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other board member, any comment on this area? Thank you, Mr. Teske, for all that you do.
All right, now get back to it. All right, next is Dr. Jacobs, followed by Mr. Green.
The next item is a request to authorize to accept grant awards for 3 programs. These are mid-year entitlement grants. This is a standard item that comes to the board 2 times a year, around January as well as around June. The mid-year entitlement grants that come in January, there are much fewer of them to approve. And just to give you an overview of those grants, we've briefed all of board members on these particular entitlement grants. The first one is the Office of Safe Schools, Safety and Security of School Buildings. That's just a little bit over $4 million. And those funds are used to improve the safety and security of school buildings, as well as to support school hardening efforts. The next one is Title III, Enhanced Instructional Opportunities for Recently Arrived Immigrant Children. This is about $23,000, and that's just to help transition children who are entering U.S. public schools. And then the final one is Title IX, Part A. That's the education of homeless children and youth. And this is approximately $89,000, and that's to facilitate the enrollment, attendance, as well as success of students who are homeless in our schools.
Thank you, board members. I just have one question before we begin. Do we have the count on homeless students? I know we had it in fall. What is it now?
Yes, so as of January, we have 471 homeless students.
Thank you, Ms. Berenborg. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I know it's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through and a lot of paperwork. So I appreciate whoever's doing the paperwork because I know what it's like and it's a lot. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Pasca?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
No, nothing. We just,
Mr. Dyer? Okay, good to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, the next item is a review of the proposed 25-26 instructional calendar. As you're aware, there's an instructional calendar committee. I have to thank Dr. David Erickson for continuing to lead that effort. That committee consists of representatives from district staff, school-based leadership, parents, representation from our CWA and IRCEA organizations. And that work is always happening a year and a half in advance. So last year, this time, this calendar was out just for the public to be able to view for 6 months all through the summer. Then in August, the committee starts meeting. They have a series, and it's an iterative process that they go through, looking at the calendar, making adjustments. So what you have before you in the backup is a proposed 25-26 instructional calendar. Very, very, very similar to the current 24-25 calendar. The start of school and the end of school being just one day off because of a different calendar year. But in that beginning week, the 2 optional days for teachers, and then going into a week of professional learning for teachers at the school level, at the district level, and orientations and having time to work in their classrooms. And then with students starting on Monday, the 11th of August, which one of the consistent feedbacks the committee got from that parent online information was start on a Monday when you can instead of in the middle of the week. So another year starting on a Monday. As we go through the months, the calendar is identical to this year's calendar with 3 differences. In March, spring break this year was the 3rd week of March, and that has been pushed back 2 weeks. That week then encompasses Good Friday into April. That day is moved to November 10th in honor of Veterans Day. And there is a day, September 22nd, which is a Monday, that added a day. There was a long period from having off on September 1st, which is Labor Day, all the way through the 24th of October. So moving through the traditional holidays, at the end of the year in May, you will see, similar to this year, the high school graduations. On the back, actually, lists the high school graduations. And between now and any feedback we get and coming forth to the board on the 27th, we will be adding those graduations to the front, but those are on Thursday and Friday now for the communities. This year with Sebastian River High School being on a Thursday evening, Vero Beach High School being on a Friday evening rather than a Friday evening and a Saturday morning. The 25-26 calendar replicates that, with Vero Beach High School going first on a Thursday evening and Sebastian River High School on 5/15 going on a Friday evening. Everything else is very much identical to the current calendar. And again, it is the proposed calendar that'll be coming forward for the board's approval on the 27th. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg?
Yes, there was a teacher that sent us an email concerning the first couple of days. Did you see that, Mr. Green?
I saw that today, this morning, actually. It had to do with orientations, I believe. So I did look at that a little bit. In the current 24-25 school year calendar, middle school and high school orientations were on the same day, on a Wednesday, and then elementary was on a Thursday. And we got some feedback, the calendar committee got some feedback about people not having the opportunity, having middle and high school both on the same day, causing some issues for parents to be able to attend both, and some scheduling and transportation issues. So the committee did respond to that and broke out high school on a Wednesday, middle school on a Thursday, elementary school on a Friday. So they're each on a separate day. And I think the feedback from the teacher email was having that orientation for elementary school on a Friday and the start of school on a Monday. But that was the rationale for why that was divided up into a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, was to each grade band and grouping their own independent day for orientation for parents and transportation issues.
So is it possible to switch elementary with middle school?
I will defer that to Ms. Basor a little bit from a curricular standpoint. I don't know if there's any issues that I can't foresee any.
Through the chair, I do not see any issues, and I would actually recommend that. That's preferable.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, I saw the one email, and I do know how tough it is for parents to, gather all the supplies, all that, but they should be paying attention to that in the summer and see the supply list and, kind of what the preparation is for school. So, okay,
So
thank
that's-
you.
We'll
Yeah.
certainly take that feedback into consideration prior to coming forward.
Thank you.
No. What I think, if you have consensus, we can make the change right now, especially since Ms. Besora is certainly, sorry.
That's okay.
Chair, especially since Ms. Besora says that that's recommended on her part to flip those. As far as I'm concerned, I can certainly agree. I think that we should do it. Any other board members want to support this item? This is the time to say it so there aren't any confusions later on.
Dr. Posca?
Yeah, I would support that change. I think it makes sense, and otherwise the calendar looks good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, I read the email and agree with the change for elementary, but does that put middle schools in the same position that the elementary school was in? Would be my only question.
Would that put middle schools in with an issue on a date?
What's the difference or why?
I think the difference, just standing in the hallways in each of the grade configurations during these events, the most attended event is the elementary event.
Ah.
So maybe it would be less of a burden. Somebody's got to go on Friday. The less of a burden would be the high school, more than likely. The design is significantly different in high school. It's more of a student-led process where I'm making sure I'm getting my syllabus for each of my different courses. I know where the classes are. If you're a freshman, maybe it's a little bit more intensive where your parents are walking, making sure you get to class. But elementary, it is ultimately get to know the teacher. Concerns are a little bit different in elementary from a parent from a high school. So it seems to be an easy change.
And I agree with the change also. And since you can get your schedule online, you don't see many high school kids there. I mean, we have the orientation for the ninth grade, but they know. But anyway.
Welcome like a high school friend.
Should elementary change with the high school and they go on Friday if that's the least concern and just do elementary, middle, high school versus the other way?
Yeah.
No, we were going to flop middle school, which was in elementary, so. Oh, she did, yeah, okay.
Can you tell us what you,
Yeah, what
what's
is
the
the
final
suggestion?
answer?
Elementary, middle, high.
Yay.
All right.
And nothing against the high school kids, but they just know, they're coming in and they're going, okay. They come in that first day.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. Next item, unless we have any other questions? Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I just want to kind of make a comment here and say that this is one of those situations where you have a recommendation from a committee and you have, well-intentioned people who, make these recommendations based on the information that they're given. And clearly, there are concerns that come to us from community members, and this is just a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to respond. And in our workshops, decisions that are made, and we just clearly made a decision that as long as there is consensus, they've got to do the work. So that's why it's so important for us to be prepared for our meetings and be able to give you a yay and nay sometimes right then and there. This just happened to be a good one, so I'm glad we were able to make that change.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario.
And through the chair, the next item is the review of the surplus property, and that's a standing item as we go
Hello?
through.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Berenberg,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to say one thing. Think about the fact that elementary schools kids, this is their first time, experiencing school and kindergarten. And middle school and high school, they kind of know the ropes by now. They've been learning it for years. So that's why I really like that point that teacher made. For kindergartners especially, it's tougher for coming into school and turning around and starting on Monday. And I know from being an elementary principal that half the kids aren't prepared until a week or two later. So it helps if we can get the information out earlier. I'm just going to say that 2 cents.
Thank you, good point, thank you.
I
Yes,
did
Mrs.
have-
Ario.
Yeah, sorry. I did have another question on the calendar item. I requested some information on Veterans Day. Did we have that, the history on that?
So on the Veterans Day, it has gone, sometimes we are in school on Veterans Day, sometimes we are not, and then the times that it falls on the weekends, it's either a Friday or a Monday to correspond with that. But there's not a historical pattern just in the way that it falls throughout the week. So we have had school on Veterans Day, we have been off on Veterans Day. Regardless, each of those events, and Dr. Erickson has done a great job. We actually were on with the executive director again this morning with the Veterans Council. Dr. Erickson and myself ensuring that whatever we do, we align with their programs and we offer them opportunities to come into the schools throughout that week, and that we make sure that our programs, even if we are off on a Tuesday, our bands and our programs are supporting those events at Round Island and the Sebastian Park and those types of things. So we stay in constant communication with them so that whatever happens, both of us are supporting each other on that week.
Yeah, I am a believer that Veterans Day is the day in which the nation celebrates and honors our veterans. I think our schools should do the same thing. A few years ago, we had some concerns because we were not taking off on Veterans Day. And then we had, things may have changed since, but I would be certainly a full supporter of moving it to the 11th, which would only be one day. There's really no rhyme or reason here, but except for the fact that Veterans Day is on the 11th, not the 10th. So that would be my recommendation. I would love for the board to provide, yay or nay on that as well. I do see the benefit of having, the one small benefit of having the day off on Monday, and that would be that on that actual day, students can engage in some lessons on that day to support veterans in their classrooms on that day. However, you could still do the same thing on Monday. And then on that day, those students have an opportunity to spend quality time with their parents, go visit grandparents who might be in a Veterans Administration nursing home, be able to actually go into the community and volunteer, have our students, able on that day, have off so that the bands can prepare and, plan appropriately without having to worry about missing first or second period. So I'm in favor of the 11th, not the 10th. Board members, Madam Chair?
Hey, any input, Dr. Posca?
I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, the one thing I want to say is this comes up almost every year, and we've checked with the Veterans Council in our local Veterans Council to see what they would prefer, and I believe that they have gone back and forth too. But recently, they have been really enjoying the fact that kids are doing so many veterans celebrations in the classrooms that week, and that Monday is the day that we take off to celebrate. So they, I would go with whatever the Veterans Council wants this year.
Hey, Mr. Dyer.
Yeah, I concur. I would go with what the Veterans Council wishes to do with this one.
Thank you. I have a little bit of a mixed feeling on this one. I'm the wife of a veteran and the daughter of one, and I've seen it in the high school when we're off Veterans Day. But when we are in classes on Veterans Day, we really have pushed through social studies and a lot of other subjects, the value of our veterans. So I see that. And then if they're off on Veterans Day, our band does perform. We've done that for over 20 years that I know of, both Sebastian and Vero. And it's great for them to be at those ceremonies. It really is. But I think I would go with what the veterans say, but I think when they are in school, and I've seen the plans, I think the students learn quite a bit during that time. So I think I'd stick with what it is right now.
So just a little bit. So this year, they were actually off on Veterans Day, not on the Monday. And in previous year, I think last year, this past Monday, this past November, they were off on Veterans Day. The previous year, they were also off on Veterans Day, I think.
I believe it was a weekend the previous year, so we were
So we
off.
That's
did
right,
that
that's right.
Monday.
Yeah, so Monday happened to be Veterans Day this past time, and then the other time it was a weekend,
Right.
a Saturday.
And then the
so
year
we had a
before
Monday
was
off.
actually on Veterans Day. So we have had a history of having off on Veterans Day, with the exception of being on a weekend, not the other way around. So we haven't had Mondays other than the fact that it was a weekend. It fell on a weekend. And I do believe that the Veterans Administration is in support of whatever the school district would choose. So that would fall on us to make that decision.
What did you hear?
That's all right, Mr. Dyer, thank you.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
What did you hear from your conversation with the?
So, just echoing Ms. Rosario's comment, they are in support of what we do, and they will collaborate with us on either one of those days. So they don't have a stance one way or the other. They understand we have great programs when we're in school on that day, and there's other things we do. There are, one of the feedback I just share from the committee along the way was a lot of our CWA maintenance and facilities are veterans. And one of the reasons that proposal came through that group was to be able to travel to visit those relatives that aren't here and have a 3-day weekend to be able to travel. That was the feedback that initially got it on to a Monday on the committee. I just wanted to share that.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Just one other question in terms of academics. When you have a holiday midweek, is there any really disruption to what goes on at academics? I mean, does it matter academically, whether it's a Monday or a Tuesday? You come for a day and then,
Historically, the data is extremely clear. The Monday attendance would be abysmal because you take one day off, both for staff and students, you have a 4-day weekend. So typically, having the Monday, being in school Monday and then off Tuesday means you're going to lose a lot of students and staff on that Monday.
okay.
Okay, thank you for the discussion.
Madam Chair, remember that comment when we get to the last week of school.
It is.
Mr. Green is laughing because that abysmal was when you have that in this, one day off in the middle, it's abysmal. Remember that. I'm going to remember that word.
Touche.
All right, our next one is, I'm sorry, Mr. Green, surplus property.
Thank you. So the surplus property for this month that you have before you, the vast majority of items are 18 to 22 years old, and those are TVs or computers. You will notice, as you remember, you approved the purchase of some school buses, which were in your capital plan, which we will be leveraging a energy grant to get some reimbursements. So you do have some school buses on here. I can tell you that these school buses, so one of them has no engine, one of them has bad transmission and no turbo. There is actually one propane bus on here. That particular bus has an engine and a transmission problem, but Mr. Crombecker has stripped that entire bus to use it for spare parts for all of the other propane buses. So we're leveraging everything we can do within those. And then you go on to a lot of 10 and 12-year-old. You'll see Brightlink projectors, interactive projectors. That's kind of like what we have on the wall where the students can see in the classroom. A large majority of battery backups in the closets that are 8 years old. And really the only items of value were 3 security cameras that were newer. They were only 3 years old. They still have some residual value, but they were struck by lightning, didn't reach our deductible, but there's still some value. We don't like to get rid of stuff that has a residual value unless it's just in such poor condition we can't use it. And that's basically what you have for the surplus.
Okay, Mr. Dyer?
Is there any value of these at all? I mean, how do you dispose of them? Do you put them in the dumpster, or is there somebody that buys them and pays you something?
All of the above. We try to, anything we can auction for whatever value that we have. We also have a recycling company that works with us on the computers. Some of the computers that are so old, it would actually cost us to get rid of them in a proper way to dispose of them. So sometimes they take them at no cost just to as a cost avoidance measure if it's such And then other times, we put them out on Gov Deals to see if we can get any value out of it that way.
Ms. Rosario?
Have we ever considered donating some of those to our current tech teachers, so students have an opportunity to break open a system and put it back together?
Oh, we've done, even when I was here before, we have taken, and a lot of times we'll do that before it even gets to you, but we have definitely done that. I will tell you, one of our maintenance workers who is very creative just hung a clock this morning in the finance department, and the clock center is a hard drive, and it's got components before they were IP-based, so they weren't internet. They didn't have an internet plug-in, but he's made us a historical clock that's built out of some of the parts of one that was so old. You have to stop by and see it. It's in the finance conference room.
Wow.
That's
Just
cool.
as a little bit of a legacy to IT, so we appreciated him thinking of
Wow.
us.
That's really cool.
That's incredible.
All right, anyone else on our surplus property? Okay, Mr. Green?
And the last item for me, as we have discussed during Hurricane Milton, the vast majority of damage we had were two things, opening shelters and staffing those shelters, and then debris. So the last count I had for Mr. Michael is 275,000 pounds of debris that was removed. He has one of the best systems in the state where we follow those trucks. We take pictures all along the way, when they pick it up, when they get to the dump, when they get the pay ticket, because we are dealing with 3- and 4-year-old hurricanes now, and they're asking us on this particular day, did that truck stop to pick up any other debris? How can you prove it's weighed? So he's got between finance and physical plant, we have some really strong procedures in there. This is through the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. They have a sub-grant to the Florida Division of Emergency Management, and then we are the sub-recipient of that. Basically, we need to fill out this application so that we can claim our reimbursements, which will be about $875,000 for those expenses, about half of that in debris, half of that in salary. And it designates Dr. Moore as the authorized agent to be able to fill out all the necessary forms through that step, and then we will determine a reimbursement rate, which usually ranges between 75% and 80% of those costs that would be reimbursed to us within 6 to 18 months or longer if they're questioning any of the items.
Thank you. Dr. Posca? Can't see him.
Thank you. I have nothing to add.
You're good. Okay, thank you. Ms. Berenborg?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Dyer?
I'm good.
Ms. Rosario?
All good.
Okay, thumbs up, all good.
Ms. Becerra?
Good afternoon through the chair. I am excited to bring to you some of the feedback and the committee recommendations for the instructional materials adoption for science. I would be remiss if I did not thank Miss Ann Bieber, Becky Teskey, Carrie Mitten, Kristen Bruckner, and Wendy Haddock for their support with this committee, and also the committee itself. This is a committee made up of teachers, parents, residents, administrators, and anytime you go through an instructional materials adoption, it's a pretty heavy lift and a lot of time commitment. So we're just really appreciative of those folks who committed their time to go through this process with us. There we go. So what I'm going to do with you today is just review the timeline in the process. I'll review the rank ordered list of reviewed materials, and then we'll talk about the next steps. Oops, it went faster. There we go. So August 21st, the committee was formed, and that initial email went to the board members, the superintendent, cabinet, and principals. That was also shared with all of our stakeholders, faculty, staff, parents, via the principals. And the public information officer communicated all of that information via messenger call to all the district stakeholders as well. A committee was made up of folks who were willing to volunteer and participate in this process, and an initial email went to all members of the committee on September 4th. September 10th was the first meeting, and during this first meeting, we reviewed the timeline, we conducted sunshine law training, we completed part 4 of the Florida Department of Education Library, Media, and Instructional Materials Training. That's a mouthful. September 17th, we used that as an opportunity to hold a makeup meeting for any folks who could not attend the first one. September 24th, that was the overview of the Florida Science Next Gen standards. We wanted to make sure that all committee members had a purpose for reviewing this work and understood the standards they were reviewing. September 25th through October 30th is the timeline when all of the members of the committee reviewed and evaluated the instructional materials using EdCredible, which is an online platform. We use that now to capture everything that we do for this committee. In addition to that, we are committed to this process at such a high level that we actually use the state's rubric for review. So our work will always align with the state work. And what I failed to mention at the beginning is that when the committee met to review curriculum, all of the curriculum that was reviewed was already approved by the state. There used to be a process where we might be on a parallel track where the state's reviewing while we're reviewing, and we run the risk of choosing or ranking high on the process curriculum that doesn't make the state's list. So a couple of years ago, along with staff, we talked with community members and parents about this as well. We decided that it was in our best interest to wait until the state's bid list came out and their approved list was factual, and then we would ask the committee to commit their time to do this process. November 6th, the committee met to review the data from these rubric submissions, and at that time, the committee said they wanted one additional meeting that was not scheduled originally. They wanted that for K through 5 and 6 through 8, just to review any additional information. So the way the timeline continues is I'm presenting to you obviously here today, January 13th. January 17th, a notice of public hearing will go out in the form of the agenda. The public hearing will take place on January 27th at the board meeting. The school board will vote to approve on February 25th. And at that time, the material must sit for 30 days for petitioners to contest any of the materials. And that will go from February 25th to March 26th. What I'm going to do is review a handful of slides, and some of this information will be redundant, but I'll just show it to you in different ways. This is the rank ordered list of the committee reviewed materials. Elementary K through 5, Discovery Ed ranked the highest, Savas Learning second highest, McGraw-Hill, and then followed by STEM Scopes. And as I just mentioned, all of the materials reviewed already made the state's bid list, and we reviewed everything that was on the state's bid list. So we did not choose certain publishers to review at that time. Middle school, 6 through 8, Discovery Ed ranked highest, followed by Savas, McGraw-Hill, and STEM Scopes, a very similar path to the elementary review. Biology, 9 through 12, and I'm going to put a pin in this moment of time. I'm going to review the rest of the slides if it's at the board's will, and then come back to a biology discussion at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd like to go through it, and then we have all our questions for you.
Perfect. Thank you. So biology, Savas Learning was highest ranked, followed by McGraw-Hill, Nat Geo, and STEM Scopes. And then environmental 9 through 12, that was also Savas Learning, McGraw-Hill, and Nat Geo. For Marines, we have 3 science electives up here: Marine, Forensics, and Anatomy. Those all chose Nat Geo as their highest ranked, followed by McGraw-Hill as their second highest ranked. And then Chemistry and Physics, highest ranked was Savas, followed by McGraw-Hill. This is where the redundancy comes in. This is the same information. It just gives you a breakdown of the average scores. And so for elementary, the average score for Savas was 125, Discovery Ed was 125, followed by Savas at 120. So you can just see the variations in the average scores. This is the information from that additional meeting. The committee wanted to just have one final review of different components of the top two. They felt like the top two were close enough, 125 to 120, that there was an opportunity just to look at this one other time. And so our team took notes. The committee just spoke and shared ideas, shared their feedback. So these are really the raw notes from that committee meeting. And then, just like in the elementary, it was pretty close. In the middle school, it's also fairly close, with Discovery Ed at 116, Savvis at 113. So the committee also recommended that the middle school curriculum be reviewed just through the notes as well. And there we have that. Okay. So high school biology, Savvis at 124, followed by McGraw-Hill 106, right behind that, Nat Geo, and 91 STEM scopes. And I'm going to go through these a little faster because they speak for themselves, and you've had these slides to really review, where there's quite a bit of discrepancy in the average score. I'll pause and answer questions along the way, but this is the final outcome from the committee's perspective. High school marine science, chemistry, forensic science, physics, anatomy and physiology, and this takes us to what our next steps are. So after the final committee meeting, which was November 21st, the 20 calendar day public review commenced, so November 22nd. That information is actually still up there, so if folks would still like to go review those materials, they're welcome to do so. We did not take it down after the 20 days. January 13th, today, we're going through this process. As I mentioned, the notice of public hearing will happen on January 17th. The business meeting for February 24th is when board members will be asked to approve materials. And that then starts February 25th through March 26th, the 30-day calendar period of time where petitioners may contest the curriculum. And I just one more shout out to the committee members who committed their time, volunteered a tremendous amount of effort and time to go through this process for us. And so at this time, if I can go back to the biology slide, I just have a few. We did have some comments about biology, and I wanted to go back to the rank ordered list. Oh, there we go. So we had some comments, and they were really around the first, second, and third choice around biology, and they were specific to viruses and vaccines. And so what we went back through, Savvis, I believe there were 7 pages that had quite a bit of factual information about viruses and vaccines, and there were some beliefs that there might be opinions or viewpoints that were also integrated into that curriculum. And that was the same situation for McGraw-Hill and Nat Geo as well. So I do know there is some conversation happening with the Department of Education to see if they have any further information or supplemental resources that they would like included in this. What I would like to add is that in addition to our team doing a review of the curriculum prior to implementation, our curriculum specialists meet with the teachers, they confer with other school districts, they map out and pace out all of the curriculum. That is also the time where anything that's supplemental or additional information would get added. So we are positioned where there's an additional standard that we are considering, and it's a standard. The essence of the standard is identify an instance from history of science in which scientific knowledge has changed when new evidence or new interpretations are encountered. And so I say all of that because I know the genesis of some of the comments was specifically around COVID and the vaccines. And this information was developed a few years ago, so there is obviously new information out and new reports out and new data sets out. So as we go through and we write the curriculum maps and the pacing guides, anything that's important to be added to that is when we would add that to add competing or considerations, other considerations as well.
All right, going to open this up to board members. Dr. Posca, we'll start with you. Questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, so I saw some of the comments in the emails, and I looked at the materials and McGraw and Savas related to some of the comments. So I'm interested to see if there's any interest from the Florida Department of Education in maybe altering the recommendations or seeing if these publishers are interested in giving us an updated publishing and maybe either adding and subtracting some information. I don't want to go on a very long exposition about a bunch of different things, but I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about this is obviously a publishing company that gets paid to publish these books. And, in order to understand basically the pharmaceutical industrial complex, you got to look at its two different pieces. You have pharmaceutical companies, obviously. You have federal regulators and agencies like FDA, CDC, NIH, and NIAID. And then you have media and publishing corporations, which would include journalists and medical journals, actually, like JAMA and New England Journal. And the problem that we have in the pharmaceutical industrial complex is really decades of ingrained and corruption, and that's come on into these industries and interconnected. And I'm not going to spend a long time talking about this, but I want to give a few examples so people understand that it is actually a real problem that persists today, and it's probably the most corrupt industry. Even worse than the DoD and the military industrial complex in fraud and waste and backroom deals. So just to give some examples, in about a 10-year period, if you looked at the drugs the FDA approved from 2000 to 2011, they approved 220 new drugs, and of those drugs that went through clinical trials and were approved, they had to add to about a third of those, 77, black box warnings for severe adverse effects, including death, associated with the drugs. So these are the drugs they approved over a 10-year period. Almost a third of them, we find out that the FDA was basically a complete failure at assessing their safety data. And this is not a new problem. This has been going on, and that's why doctors generally don't use new drugs when they come out. They use the tried and true drugs, and they wait about a decade to collect more data, and they might use them on patients basically that have adverse effects to the first or second or maybe even third line drugs for that class, whatever that disease may be. So the FDA is approving drugs that are unsafe consistently, regularly for decades. The FDA does something where sometimes they award what's called an expedited approval. In these, there's stipulations that the pharmaceutical companies, since they're getting their drug to market faster, they have to continue safety and data analysis and provide studies to prove it actually is safe. And a review that was done of those expedited approvals found that the stipulated studies are only conducted about 38% of the time. So just over a third of the time, these pharmaceutical companies are actually confirming that these drugs are safe. They're really just not looking at it. They're taking their expedited approval, and the FDA is not doing anything about it. And combine that with the fact that this is not a meme. It turns out it's very true. 9 of the last 10 commissioners of the FDA went to go work for a pharmaceutical company, usually on the board of that company after they left. And that represents over 40 years of leadership of FDA to present time. So they give sweetheart deals and pass unsafe drugs, and then after 10 years at a government agency, they go work for Pfizer or Moderna most of the time, and they make massive amounts of money, and they maybe get their payoffs after they leave their government agency, is what it looks like. And that, so that's on the drug side. That's part of it, but there's also cancer-causing chemicals that are consistently found in our drugs that are contaminants that are not even supposed to be there. So I'm sure some of you have read studies about these, but one example is nitrosamine compounds, one of them being N-nitrosdimethylamine, or NDMA. You guys probably read a few years back that was found in over-the-counter Zantac, a heartburn medicine. It was also found in dozens and dozens of other medications that are commonly prescribed for blood pressure and heart disease. So this chemical causes cancer. We weren't looking for it, we weren't testing for it, and eventually it was found, and it's probably had been there for a while in many drugs. And when you go back and you look retrospectively, where did this enter the supply chain in the manufacturing and distribution process? It primarily comes from reagents that are bought cheaply from China. So now we have our biggest foreign competitor who objectively wants Americans dead, selling us the chemicals we need to make our drugs, and in it there are contaminants that will kill us. And this has been going on for a number of years under the FDA's guidance or lack thereof. And just to show how they really don't follow any protocols or procedures, there was a drug a couple of years ago, Aduhelm, that was approved by the FDA, even after the committee that was supposed to look at all the data and the trials. The 11-person expert panel all unanimously voted against it, and so did the biostatistician that was counseling the expert panel. And they voted against it because it actually showed zero efficacy at improving Alzheimer's, but it was associated with fatal side effects, including intracranial hemorrhage. So zero benefit and proven to be dangerous, but the FDA says, hey, let's do it anyway. So this is what's been going on, and this is really a small fraction of it. There's tons of stuff in the foods, food and drug. I'm not going to go through the thousands of compounds and chemicals that are in our foods that cause cancer, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, hypertension, and other problems, and many of which are illegal almost most developed places in the world. But we'll talk about just one of them, and that's glyphosate or Roundup that we spray on our grains and is in bread and cereal and oatmeal. Your kids are eating it multiple times a day. And what we've known about glyphosate is metabolized into another chemical called AMPA, or aminomethylphosphonic acid. Both of the glyphosate and the AMPA are toxic. They're specifically because of the compound's ability to go through plasma membranes and the nuclear membrane. It can enter a cell, enter the nucleus, and cause direct DNA damage. And once you damage the DNA, and it does it through a few different pathways, it can cause single-stranded DNA breaks, double-stranded DNA breaks. It can oxidize base modification, and it can cause DNA adducts, all of which lead to mutations in DNA, especially over repeated exposure. So even low-dose exposures over long periods of times, you're going to have an innumerable number of damage to the DNA, and then you have all these molecular processes that are supposed to go back in and repair it. But over time, these build up and you get mutations, and when you mutate certain parts of your DNA, it leads to cancer. So the glyphosate we knew from the beginning was never safe. Once again, the FDA decides, let's spray it on almost every meal you eat, you're eating glyphosate in it. Let's put it that way. It's in almost everything. And this is clearly unsafe. There's no way at any dose it's unsafe, or any parent would want to give it to their children. Yet somehow FDA leadership says this is safe, and it should be in your diet. So what we see from federal regulators and CDC, NIH, FDA, NIAID is they don't really have standards. They do not care about safety in the same way a parent would care about safety. And there appears to be intense long-standing corruption and collusion between the agencies, pharmaceutical companies, as well as I'll call it the media and publishing. And part of that is just because there's so much money. Pfizer alone spent $3.6 billion in 2023 advertising. Many of that money goes to publishing company, media corporations, and scientific journals. And because of that, the media doesn't publish concerns about drugs potentially, and they get different kind of treatment. And this is a long-standing relationship between this pharmaceutical company as well as many, many other pharmaceutical companies. Like, they didn't start giving billions of dollars in 2023. It's been going on for a very long time. So, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at all of this, what's in some of these science and biology curriculums, and this is, we're talking about elementary, middle school, high school. I tell you, it is far, far worse in the medical industry. Doctors everywhere know this, that half of our board exam are actually really, they're questions that were put on there ultimately by the pharmaceutical companies that should not even be on our board exams. That's how bad and invasive this corruption is in education. So I'm not surprised there's problems in these biology and science textbooks as it relates to, you know, these curriculums and if we should buy them. There may not be a specific curriculum that doesn't have some of this. In fact, you know, of the major publishers, what I would like to see is maybe they could pull some of this stuff out that is just unnecessary. You know, there's a lot these kids need to learn. You know, in there, I think it was page 129 of McGraw, they said the best treatment for a virus is a vaccine. And, you know, the reality is many viruses you cannot make a vaccine for. In fact, they've been trying for 50 years to try to make a vaccine for coronaviruses and rhinoviruses, and they've been unsuccessful because there's so many different strains and variations. In fact, as soon as you make a vaccine and give it to people, all you've done is caused a different strain to circulate. So it actually has almost no effect. So that's scientifically just a poor statement. And then, you know, the statements on the COVID vaccine itself and the messenger RNA technology, I'm not going to go into that in detail, but the COVID vaccine was the first major drug brought to market using messenger RNA. It's extremely dangerous technology that specifically my background in molecular biology is an expert in. And the problem with this is that it's in a lipid bilayer driver. And just to give an example, we used to have fungal infections in the brain, and we needed to get an antifungal into the brain because it was a fatal fungal infection of the brain. And what we found is certain preparations that were early on, such as amphotericin B, in the wrong lipid bilayer driver, were actually more fatal than the fungal infection in your brain. So it took many years to find a driver that would actually even lower the mortality if you had an active fungal infection in your brain. And the lipid bilayer drivers that were used for this drug, for the messenger RNA vaccine, they've never been used in another drug before. That's the driver alone. So that driver can, you know, it can incorporate into plasma membranes. It allows the drug to reach the nucleus. Additionally, you know, there's been a lot of misinformation from, once again, these government agencies. They said that the COVID vaccine cannot get into the nucleus. This was one of them. That is, in fact, wrong. There are ports that allow messenger RNA, transfer RNAs, or RNA in general to reach the nucleus once it gains entry to the cytoplasm, which it obviously is designed to make it into the cytoplasm. So it can reach the nucleus. And the biggest issue is whenever you put in RNA that's foreign into a nucleus, there is absolutely no way to know what's going to happen in that specific individual. In fact, some of the side effects will specifically be genetic, specific to that person. So a different genetic code wouldn't experience the side effect. This person with their genetic code may, and there's no way to actually study it because of that. You know, additionally, we talked about glyphosate as one example of things in our environment that are constantly causing DNA damage. If this mRNA, foreign mRNA is in a nucleus with DNA that does have damage and there's repair processes going on, it can inadvertently be incorporated through various means or contaminate the repair process. Also, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but whenever you're transcribing and translating DNA and RNA, there's all these proteins involved in the process. There's regulatory proteins, there's the proteins that are actively doing the process, and they are actually driven by RNA themselves. So the RNA controls those proteins, and it will change depending on the type of gene sequence you're looking at and what the process is. It could literally alter how much protein of a certain thing you're making from that specific cell. So in general, I would just say the messenger RNA technology is extremely unsafe. It is not ready to prevent disease, and it probably never will be. It probably has uses in terminal illnesses, but it should never be used to prevent a disease, in my opinion. In my medical opinion, I would not recommend anyone take a messenger RNA drug unless they had a terminal condition. But I guess the elementary biology book probably knows better than me. So they had a different opinion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Posca. Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that biology gets dinged because it usually gets dinged for lots of reasons. I was surprised it didn't get dinged for other reasons. I agree with a lot of what Dr. Bosca said as far as Roundup in our food, things like that. But it comes down to what is it as a board we're going to do about this. I do know I spoke to the superintendent about, his calls into Manny Diaz's office and what is their suggestion, because they approved all these materials. So what is their suggestion then? Because a lot of times these publishers write it 3 to 5 years ahead. And so when the book comes out, it's really hard to remove something because it's printed. So what we have to do instead is that's when our team goes in there and says, okay, we're going to work on the curriculum mapping and say, we're going to skip this chapter, we're going to do this chapter, and so on. The other thing is parents always have the right to opt out of something that's being taught. And the question I have is, how will parents know when things are being taught that are controversial?
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
Okay, so I don't even know where to begin on this. Thank you for that extreme review, the thorough review, rather. And I'm like fascinated whenever I hear Dr. Posca talk, because he's just, to me, he's brilliant at his craft, and he knows so much about it, and I honor his opinion. So I'm glad that he went into detail about some of those things. As he was talking, he mentioned DNA, and so it just kind of triggered a question in my mind about where that remains, that and the topic of COVID and vaccines and all this other kind of stuff, which seems to be the main controversy in much of the science curriculum, just in general. And what's interesting is when I pull up the standards, there's really no standard that actually talks about COVID or vaccines. But there is there are standards that address how your genetic code is made, how organisms affect the genetic code, or the genetic code affecting organisms. And then there is one here, which was interesting. Describe how viruses and bacteria transfer genetic material between cells and the role in the process of biotechnology. And I think that's really the one that might be the one to focus on, because that's obviously where we're going to talk about viruses. Clearly, no one is going to deny that COVID-19 is a virus and that it did exist. I don't think anyone would deny that. But it's certainly along the line, I think the question is along the lines of what information are we then giving regarding that virus? And That's really where the controversy is. It's making sure that the information that came out after the virus, after the pandemic, that's the part that concerns me the most. And I think in taking, a little bit of what Dr. Posca said and what Mrs. Berenborg said is just leaning on you, Ms. Besora, to make sure that we just don't teach some of those things that are not 100% certified, I suppose, to be real and true rather than those things that might be opinions, not rooted in science, things that are not rooted in science and or things that are not factual. And I think that's really where the rubber meets the road for me as a board member. I don't want to teach or have our teachers be in a position of saying, well, so many people, whatever that might be, so many people died of COVID, so many people died because of COVID, or so many people during this time period died because they took the vaccine. That's something that I think is very unsure, and it's not just my opinion. Science now says the powers that be, the doctors, even the Department of Health is even admitting nowadays that we don't really know those numbers, right? Those numbers are pretty up in the air. And those are the little pieces within the curriculum that cause pause for me. It certainly isn't that we shouldn't teach, that COVID-19 existed. It's the other things. And so I think that if we could put a button on some of those things that are not, we don't see both sides, then we should put a pause on those. And I think it would be right for us to do it, especially since we don't have a standard that talks specifically to that particular topic, if that makes any sense. I don't know, I think Dr. Moore should, and I'll mention something just to another support for what Dr. Posca said and what I'm saying now, is the fact that he says, he said one of the recommended curriculum, I think, or one of the ones that were reviewed actually indicated that the viruses are cured by a vaccine, and when in fact we have a doctor who's actually saying, no, that's not true. There are some viruses that can't be. Those are the kinds of little things, little strands of information that I don't think that we should be responsible for imparting upon kids. And I think that's really the crux of it. The other thing is, I had a question for you with regard to the standards. I don't see biology here under 9 through 12. I only see that for 9 through 12, there's life science, physical science, earth science, nature of science, and computer science, but I don't see biology. And I'm on CPOMs, by the way. So
Yes.
if you want to,
So many of the standards fall into different areas. There is actually a standard that does address the human immune system, including specific and non-specific immune responses, vaccines, and antibiotics, and that is SC.912.L.14.52. And so that's the standard. We believe that these 7 pages in Savvis, and I think 13 pages in McGraw-Hill, and a handful of pages in Nat Geo as well, is really addressing. But what I would say is that we are committed to, anytime we add new curriculum, the specialists, the teachers, they spend an enormous amount of time reviewing that curriculum, creating pacing guides and curriculum maps, much to Mrs. Berenborg's point, and they lay out the plan for teaching that curriculum. And so we're committed to working with not only our own internal specialists and stakeholders, but also with other districts. There are currently 17 other districts that are already implementing this curriculum, because as I was describing at the beginning of this session, we do it now a year later, And so there are already 17 who did this last year and currently in it. So between some conversations with the Department of Education and conversations with our colleagues around the state, we'll find ways to add supplemental resources and curriculum that addresses any new or updated or evolving information.
Okay. So let's go back to the biology, right? Just, I guess, that title. Did you say that would fall under life science instead of biology?
Yeah, let me pull them up.
And also, was that L4?
That one was L14.52.
1.4.52. Okay, so that would be explain the evidence supporting the scientific theory of the origin of some cells that I can't pronounce that name.
So the standard that it explained the basic functions of the human immune system, including specific and non-specific immune response, vaccines, and antibiotics.
Oh, that's not what I'm looking at all. But okay. So, I think I had another question, like why are we still labeling biology instead of because it falls under the life science. Why don't we change that? Because we don't have a standard called biology anymore. The standard is life science. So if we're in this process now, why aren't we aligning that course to life science instead of biology?
That would be a great Department of Education question.
Well, no, it's ours. The Department of Education has it down as life science.
And then they also have course codes that relate to biology.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
So you're saying it's
Course
a
codes.
course code. But
Correct.
then they also have a course code for life science, no?
Oh, gosh.
It would have to because that's
challenging
where
my
the-
memory now.
Okay,
There are
don't
a
worry,
million
don't worry.
course codes.
All right, don't worry,
Yes.
don't worry. But yeah, I mean, if we could go ahead and look into that,
Yes.
it might be something minor for us to do, but if we could better align with the stamp, whatever the, so I hear what you're saying. So the course is biology, but
Correct.
the standard is life science.
Correct.
Well, that's a little weird. That we definitely need to bring up. Okay, then the other question that I had would be for no, it's on theories. So we talked about theories just now, and there is a standard, let me bring it up, the benchmark.
And Ms. Bieber, my trusty phone a friend, as you're looking at the standards on CPALMs,
Yeah.
you can look at it by standard or you can look at it by course code.
Okay.
And if you look at it by biology, it'll give you all of the standards.
Okay, because I'm in standards, so I'd have to go back.
Yes.
But, okay, so let me come back, I'm still in standard. The benchmark for standard, I don't know if you want the number. It doesn't, it's in nature of science. It's under the nature of science section. Still grade 9 through 12. Explain that a scientific theory is the culmination of many scientific investigations drawing together all of the current evidence concerning a substantial range of phenomena. And there's a little bit more there. So I think when you mention theory, that would also be a part of the whole idea of theories. And I get very worried when it comes to theories, because theories, as far as, I mean, when I grew up, the theory of evolution was the theory that we were supposed to believe was real, and it wasn't a theory, it was real. I mean, we, every year, had a trip, this is in New York, of course, to the Museum of Natural History, and you had this entire view of an evolution from whatever it was, you know, ape, all the way to human. And that's actually still standing today. It's probably been there for 100 years. But I worry about theory because I would rather us focus on, and I get this standard which says that it's important for students, because there's another one, it's important for students to understand how theories are made and where theories come from and that entire process of developing a theory. That's incredibly important. But to actually teach a theory as real is not accurate. And so that's why I worry about theories. If we're going to teach theories, then we need to teach all theories, and I don't think that we are in general. So coming back to the whole COVID-19 controversies and all that other, that's part of where I am filtering my information just to make sure that we are accurate, and when we're not accurate, we're sure to show all of the sides. And then you decide, right? That's really what education should be. Not teaching you what you should know, but giving you the ability to see all sides, and then you come up with the decision, whatever that decision might be. So I will leave it right there with my comments and questions. Dr. Moore, there was a question that Ms. Barenborg mentioned about you having conversations with the Department of Education. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and fill us in on what that, or follow-up or something you were supposed to do?
So no follow-up yet. I haven't had any conversations other than some quick communications, and I'm on a point of standby. So if anything evolves, ultimately we will let the board know. I think we'll have a little bit of traction or clarity based on meetings that I'm not involved in.
Okay.
But we'll see where that goes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Dyer.
Yeah, I just have a point of clarification, if I could ask, is we have to use state-approved curriculum. Is that correct? All of these were approved. And yet, from what I heard, we have the ability to not teach what's in the curriculum, and we have the ability to supplement what's in the curriculum, which sounds like that you're not teaching state curriculum. So, I mean, state-approved curriculum. So I'm a little confused because it seems like you have the latitude to do something different than what the state has approved, although I thought that was what we had to teach. So you got to educate me a little bit about why, and if we have that latitude, I guess we have it everywhere. We can teach what we want to teach. Is that what it's saying?
Through the chair, districts do have the authority to go outside of the scope of the state-approved curriculum. When it comes to our core curriculum, we try very hard to stay in line with the state-approved curriculum because it's been vetted at multiple levels. But to your point about changing or adapting or adding supplemental, in terms of those questions, there are actually science standards that address that, because sometimes we've had our current science curriculum for 8 years, and there are things that are different now than they were 8 years ago. So some of these science standards, the wording around them, identify an instance from history of science in which scientific knowledge has changed when new evidence or new interpretations are encountered. That's a science standard. Another science standard along that same level of thinking is scientific knowledge is durable and robust but open to change. Another one is identify sources of information and assess reliability according to strict standards of scientific investigation. So in terms of science curriculum, science may move faster than our next adoption. So there might be opportunities where we have to add new things. For example, I believe there was a White House report that came out in December of 2024 addressing COVID. I have not read it. It's 500 and some pages long. But some of the statistics,
Summer, right?
yes, some of the statistics that are cited in the textbooks may have actually already changed. And I just don't know if they have or they haven't.
Then may I suggest that we add supplemental material based on current science. I think that a lot of the points that were made were were valid, and that we, move on. I mean, the science does evolve. That's one of the things that I was going to say is science does evolve, and there are different opinions. And, you never know. I mean, I'm sure I remember as a kid taking the polio vaccine on a sugar cube,
Yep.
a live virus. Who knew? But you knew there were a lot of people that were in iron lungs. And we tend to wipe out polio. So some work and some don't. That's science.
Right.
And I guess that, if there are things that are, science will always move forward. Some things are going to work and some are not. But when you get the knowledge that they're not working, you need to fail quickly.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
Ms. Rosario, then I'll make my comments.
Yeah, I agree with regard to what some science has been able to accomplish. Personally, I'm okay with vaccines. I think everybody personally, I think everyone should be able to make their own decision. That's my stance. I just don't believe personally in mandating, vaccinations. But that aside, something that, with regard to your question, curriculum, the things that we present to students, even though it's approved by the Department of Education, it's not 100%. Even some of the curriculum that has come to us is pretty inaccurate and not worthy. We've had, I'm sure that, Ms. Besora can attest to some curriculum that has been approved by the DOE that just doesn't, she wouldn't recommend to put in front of kids. But that said, curriculum can change, and we do have the ability to do that. It's the standards that we can't change. It's the, those benchmarks of what learning is supposed to be, what kind of learning they're supposed to receive. It's how that we give it to them that can change. And so if we had an issue a couple of years ago with the English, was it English or reading? And there were some chapters or something that were inside of the books that just weren't appropriate and didn't align with the standards. And of course, as a district, under the superintendent's supervision, we can make adjustments there. They could make adjustments there. But overall, it's really the standards that are not allowed to be changed.
Sounds like the Department of Education has some work cut out for them to
Yes.
review a
hence
little
the
more thoroughly.
Yes, exactly.
Hopefully, they have as good a process as you did, looking
Yes.
at curriculum. I think the process that you went through to look at these seemed very robust and thoughtful. So
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we don't have to choose any of these.
Right.
Yeah.
We could choose curriculum that comes from a private, curriculum writer somewhere else. It doesn't have to be the ones that the Department of Education approves or, recommends, rather. We could always do that, and I hope that we can do that process for classical education, because clearly the traditional recommended curriculum is not classical related. So we have to start looking into that for our classical school. But the law is very clear that we can actually adopt those that are recommended by the Department of Education or come up with our own in some other way.
Okay, just a few comments. Thank you, board members. I did this adoption in 2017-18. Adoptions take a lot of time and work. It looks like your committee, as Mr. Dyer and Ms. Rosario said, really put effort toward it. Question, what book does biotech use? I'm sorry if I missed it. Ms. Baser, do you remember if they're using any of, what does biotech use for?
Biotech uses the CTE standards.
Okay, all right. I was wondering about
For
that.
biotechnology.
Okay, so, but do they take can't remember if they use a textbook at all.
I need to double check with them.
Okay, I don't think they use, but looking at some of that. I agree with a lot of what's been said today. These books were probably printed 2 years ago to get everything ready. We don't have to do state approved. And as Ms. Berenborg said, if you don't agree with something, you can exempt your child. But I think the key for us here is stick to the standards. Public education, what we need to do, what is the desired outcome. Some people may agree with some things, some people may disagree, but sticking to the standards, make sure our teachers have the support they need in teaching the standards. will be the key for us in biology or in any subject. So, but it was a good discussion. But stick to the standards and keep moving forward. Board members, any other thoughts? Okay, we done. Does anyone need a break before my last two items? They're going to be about 2 hours. I'm just.
No. Whoa.
I'm just. Whoa. Does it? I'm sorry. Sorry, Ms. Berenborg. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment about theories. I teach a lot of theories in my science classes, and for example, cell theory. And things start out as, a hypothesis, then they become a theory, and then when many scientists have tested it and all agree, then it's law. So there are not that many laws that weren't, as a matter of fact, they were theories first. So a theory is important, but when we teach it, we say this is a theory, and there's lots of others. But we can't start talking about other theories, because then teachers are going to get off on a tangent and get in trouble. They need to stick, like you said, to the standards and teach exactly what it says to teach there, and not teach something different, because that's when they can actually get in trouble.
I agree. And I think that's a
I agree too.
safe harbor. Anybody need a break? We good?
Good.
Okay. So I have the next two and then Ms. Berenborg. Okay. Mine on public records request. I just had a question. When we received the public records request for the last year, I noticed a board member did public records requests. About a couple of years ago, we put in our protocols that if a board member requests something, it goes to all other board members. And with two new board members on here, Dr. Moore, is it just that we go through you and then all of the information comes to board members? Because I did one last week with Dr. McMahon, and I think he'll get it to me this week. And at the end of my text, I said, please share with all board members. I wanted to get an update on bullying. So how does that go?
So just for informational purposes, any request board members would like, if you can send it to me, and I will facilitate with the appropriate staff or myself. I think the board protocol references if it's over an hour's
Right.
worth of work. Typically, if that's ever been the case, I'll circle back with that particular board member and clarify in terms of what the actual request is. And then when I provide that information, I provide it to all board members. And
Okay,
that
I
would
just
be-
wanted to make sure I was correct. So, because when I usually just go through you, and then it goes back to all board members. Okay.
Correct.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, it depends as well, because if anything is communicated through the superintendent, when he receives that information, he's supposed to share it with everybody. But if an individual board member requests a public record as a citizen or separately from going directly to the superintendent, whatever that information is, he's not responsible for sharing with anyone, because it hasn't developed into official action. What is public record is official action. If nothing has developed from that point, there's nothing to share, because he may not even know what is being requested. So it all depends on how that information is being communicated. Again, if something is directly communicated to the superintendent of, please give me the data on discipline, or whatever it is, then when he starts to work on that, it is now part of official action and something that he should share with you all. But if an individual board member is asking public records, not through the superintendent, something else, no one, you don't even know what that's for. It's not even official action. It could be anything. As a citizen, it doesn't really matter. I mean, not that it doesn't matter, but it won't be public through the superintendent until it's then action is taken. So if I look and I'm doing research, if any one of you is doing research and you receive information through public records and you decide, I'm not going to move forward with this, it doesn't develop into official action, nothing happens from it. If from that point I have a conversation with Dr. Moore and say, I've been doing this research, I really, this needs to be on the next workshop, this is going to develop into something, we need to talk about this. At that point, it has now become part of official action. And of course, we have a new attorney here with us, Ms. Enville, so I'm so excited to have you. I'd love to kind of toss this your way if you can follow up with what I'm saying. Clearly, if there's anything that I'm saying wrong, but I'll just hand it over to you.
familiar with your protocol, I'd have to take a look at that first, but I'll be happy to take a look at it.
Okay. But just in general, if an individual board member requests public records through the Public Records Department or office, and it has not developed into any official action in any way, shape, or form,
It's all open to the public anyway. I
Right.
mean, you know, we need to know that, but I don't know what your protocol says. If your protocol says.
doesn't say
I
anything.
don't think it probably doesn't delineate whether you're as a public official or not. But
No.
if the board has established some sort of protocols that say anytime a board member makes a public records request, it goes to everybody, that's, I don't know what your protocol says.
it doesn't say that. It only says anything that we communicate through the superintendent should be shared with board members.
Just a question on that. Now, Dr. Moore, you just said that if we have a question, it comes to you and it comes back to all the school board members. And I remember getting several of those, like when I asked Mr. Fagan a question, please share with all board members. Why would we do a public records request? And this is just discussion. Instead of asking our superintendent, and I understand official action, I don't know that state statute or that law, I've never heard of that, but why would we do that when here we are trying to get information as those in the district who are responsible for the education? Why would we do a public record instead of just asking them? I mean, forget the official review.
Every situation is different, you never know.
I don't know if I
You
agree.
You can't assume every situation is exactly the same.
Well, and on the ones you requested, I like to have the answers because about,
So, call them up, ask for the documents, it's
Okay.
public records.
okay, I'm just sorry.
You can ask
Where am
for
I?
it.
Oh, yeah, I know the protocol, yeah. Requesting board members should ask the superintendent fulfilling the request. If it goes over 1 hour, superintendent will work with the board member to narrow the request if it does not exceed 1 hour, so it doesn't. If the request cannot be crafted to take less than 1 hour or is required an expenditure of funds, the board member will present the request of a board meeting or workshop. A consensus of the school board is necessary to move forward such requests. Information that was requested by the board member will be provided to all board members. Now, I know that's protocol, but I just think as a, unified board, if we're wanting to know something like I requested bullying last time, that should go to all board members. I want to get an update on that every semester. I don't know, I just don't think we need to go through public records requests, and that's what the superintendent said. So do you want to, I'm sorry, Mr. Dyer, you had a question or a comment?
I guess just a comment. It just appears to me that if a board member requests public records from the board or from the school district, which they are a board member, it seems to me that should be available to all board members. I mean, it just doesn't make sense because you have the ability to go right to you.
Correct.
And to get any answer that you want. So if there's something that, and it is public, it's public records, and especially it is board business if you're asking something that you're about the board that you're on, or about the district that you are a board member of. So, I mean, there's something in here that doesn't make sense, and perhaps we need to address the protocol and fix it there.
I just think we're all talk about transparency all the time. So if
Yeah,
the information's out there, let's just get it to everybody.
Yeah.
Dr. Moore, do you have a final comment? Or
I think
am I off?
through the chairs, some of this, and listening to what everyone says, part of the issues on me, my staff who typically sends the public record information on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Was out. So there was a number of weeks in which it unfortunately wasn't sent. I understand the issue, and I'm fine with it. I'll take it. But if that information was flowing as it typically was, then all board members were able to see it through
Right.
public records and ask any questions they may have. But ultimately, I would encourage board members to reach out to me, and I could facilitate the request, regardless of what that request is.
Okay. All righty. I have the last item, and this is on school start times. Check it out. There were two attachments on the agenda. One was a survey done in 2017, about 78 pages, Dr. Fritz. I read through that survey, and a lot of good, some of you might have been on the committee, I can't remember. You were. A lot of good information. I noticed the parameters set up. You know, you're all going to have disagreements, elementary, middle, and high school parents, but it really was good. At the end, they decided no time changes, okay. About 330 parents replied there. Good information shared. And then we've talked about communication and parent input. Right now, the state says the high school start at 8:30, middle school at 8, starting in the 26-27 school year. And my only intent in bringing this is to make sure our parents are aware and they can respond. Those two items, and then just this morning from Chris Doolin, the small schools are asking for a survey on how this will affect them and what are they going to do. And I also put on the legislative platforms for the FSBA. One of them said, let the local school boards decide. So just a few comments. You know, high school start too early at 7:05, absolutely, and they're done that. And just a little bit of institutional knowledge. When I was principal of Gifford Middle 6, not Gifford Middle, we were the last drop off about 8:45. Then we went to 8 a.m. start up with the schools, which we are now with the middle schools. High schools at that time were around 7:20 and elementary 8:45. And again, when you look at this, it's just saying, let's hear from our parents. I represented Chair Barenborg at the Treasure Coast Council of Local Government last Thursday at Marsh Landing. The school board member from St. Lucie said they're going to start with committees, and one of them is going to be a student committee, how this will affect everybody. You know, we're a high-performing district. I think that we could certainly talk about it. I did email our representative Brackett and Senator Grawl just to let them know I was bringing up this topic because FSBA said just be sure to let them know. So I'm thinking, could we at least start with a survey or a committee? You know, right off they may say, we like it, 8, middle school 8:30, and elementary, I think you were thinking before 8, right, Dr. Moore? I mean, just when you looked at it in general.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And if you look at the times now, there's about 45-minute difference between drop-offs of our schools, if you look at all the times. But no matter what, when this comes about, parents will have to make adjustments, and I want them to be aware. Through Dr. Morrow last week, I asked, and I also put in there, this will be shared with all board members, through the high school principals. You look at, I'm starting to get that data back and it'll be shared. Athletics, band, those watching siblings, those getting home before them, dual enrollment, those who work. When all information is in, how will this affect our students? And more importantly, how will it affect our parents? I just want to get a scenario out there with a committee or a survey. And after that survey, we could say, okay, done there, we don't need it anymore, but I just want it to be discussed. And I started thinking, what if elementary does start at 7:40 or 7:30? I'll use 7:30. Their time now is 8:50 to 3:30, 6 hours and 40 minutes. If elementary starts early, they'd be around 7:30 to 2:10. Those whose parents cannot pick them up, they'll be in after-school care about 3 hours. So, I mean, we really just need to look at it. I think there are so many variables, and I just wanted to, yes, it's a law, but I'm telling you, districts are looking at it. They're going to present it. They said to email your representative and senator. I haven't heard back from them. I'll double check. And I just think it's something we should talk about with our community. You know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago now maybe, after a very, very intensive study, they said we don't want changes. So, hey, I know high school start too early. I mean, as a parent who had 3 children in the system and as a middle school and high school principal, I understand that 7:05 was too early, but I just think we need to get input from our community and take a look at it. So just wanted to open that up for discussion. Ms. Barenborg, are you still there?
Dr. Posca.
I am. I do
Dr.
want to talk
Poska,
about
I'm sorry,
this
I can't see
because-
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Barenborg.
Sorry. Okay, so this is a platform for FSBA too.
Yeah.
And there is some discussion going around on the Hill in Tallahassee about this particular topic because I don't think the writers of this legislation realize how expensive it would be for districts to put this into place so quickly. And that's the part is, you know, what's the cost going to be? So we also did a survey back on my first year on the board for this. and we got to find it, but I think it was in year 2018 or 19, somewhere in there. And that was very telling. Parents did not want to change the times. So, when people get used to certain things, they are used to certain things, but it could be good. But, I think just the cost of it is really kind of alarming too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Pasca?
He had a medical emergency.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I remember,
Like to address one. He didn't have one
and
himself.
I understand the sleep that our high school kids, I understand that. But if they could even start at 8 versus 8:30, again, that goes to the parents. But I just think a lot of districts are looking at this and I think our state would look at this too and say, the local people should decide, and then we go from there. Ms. Rosario, any comments?
Yeah, so this is not a new conversation. We had this conversation in January of 2024. In fact, I put it on a workshop, and it was brought to the board on January 22nd, 2024, as a charge for the superintendent. In that meeting, it was to authorize the superintendent to develop a timeline regarding the potential impact of the new start times. And with that, he was supposed to present to the board in February. That would have been that next month. And the items that he was also supposed to present to us was what he was going to do to move forward and in process of communication, engaging the community, the operational impact, and so on. The follow-up from that, from the superintendent, was not in February. It was March 11th, of which he presented to the board his plan in a pretty comprehensive strategic planning timeline. It is his recommendations for the timeline moving forward, basically what he's going to do. It included our current start times. It included the communication in which he was going to take towards this, these changes, which is really not, we don't have a choice right now. It is the law. It is based on legislation, so we have to follow what the law says. And that would require actually that the middle schools cannot begin earlier than 8 a.m. and the high schools cannot begin earlier than 8:30 a.m. beginning by July 1st, 2026. So at least by July 1st, 2026, we have to have that in place. So in his presentation, he said that he would communicate with through social media posts, parent notices, gather stakeholder feedback, engage community partners, provide board updates, which we haven't received updates. So there's quite a few things in here in this timeline plan that you presented to the board, Dr. Moore, that hasn't been done. That is true. Communication defined, it says here that by April or May of 2024, you would have stakeholder feedback in the form of survey to parents regarding enrollment impact, elementary ridership, extended day services, that you would meet with IRCEA and CWA and then analyze that feedback as a district leadership team. The other thing that it included was that you would meet with youth activity groups, community partners, parks and recreation, IRSC regarding dual enrollment, TCTC, FHSAA, county officials regarding signage, traffic patterns, lights, transportation, conferences, analyze the feedback, and with regard to operational impact, you said the adjustments would extend to extended day hours, transportation of staff hours, current routing for buses, courtesy stops, staff hours, contract language, security measures, marketing materials, practice runs, explore instructional time options, and then continue study with other districts. The financial impacts were also included, and it is provided here. We don't have a full, financial impact, but there were estimated costs here for school signage changes, athletics, transportation routing, marketing materials, and transportation costs. Then, of course, there are costs for marketing, or rather the plan for marketing that were included in this strategic planning timeline. So bringing this up is not new. This was something that was addressed by us as a board, and we charged the superintendent with it. The follow-up, though, I would agree, has not been had. And I think it would be about time. I know you would say we have a year and a half left for that to happen, but a year and a half goes by super quick, and a lot of this stuff was supposed to be done last year, according to your timeline. So we are far behind the timeline that you presented to us. I do believe that it is very important, as I've shared even from that January meeting, that we needed to get on surveys, and because there's a lot of different surveys here that are supposed to be had. And if they're not done with time enough for the team to actually analyze them and then come up with a plan moving forward, it would just work out to be a disservice, to the operation and to what we need to do to actually get this changed. And then at that point, it would be, the focus would then be, well, these are the recommendations. High school would start at 9 a.m., either 8:30, 9 a.m., and 10 a.m. Just an example. If we had those three examples, then we can present to parents, what are your three best choices? And we can get that feedback. But right now, we're not there because we haven't gotten all of the other pieces of information that the superintendent was required to submit to us, or at least present to us. So I would just ask the superintendent to give us a little follow-up on that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to let Mr. Dyer speak, and then I'll do another speaking, if it's okay, and Dr. Moore. Mr. Dyer?
I worry in this too about the elementary school kids coming at 7:10. I wonder what that does to their parents, to transportation. I guess it's a state mandate, so at this point we have to follow it, but it does create quite a lot of issues. You could go later with high school, as Ms. Rosario suggested. However, then that affects sports if you've got any extracurricular activities. So, it is something that needs to be addressed, I would say, sooner rather than later, and hopefully the Florida legislature will come to their senses and give you more latitude and let the communities decide.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario, Mr. Dyer, and Ms. Berenborg. I understand that it's a law and that we have talked about it. I really do, but districts are truly having issues with this. And if FSBA made it a platform, I asked her why she put that on there. She said, so many districts said they're having issues. And it just said, please let the districts have local control. And I do think, if a lot of districts have issues, if we give feedback to the state, they might listen for local control. And like I said, I know high school started a little early, but there's so many variables, like I said, in high schools. It's just not kids in athletics, band, drama. And like I said, I'm starting to get those percentages, but those going home and watching siblings, those working, those having responsibilities after school. So I'm just asking that we maybe send out a survey and see what parents think, because I know, listen, a parent with 3 kids, I'm not thinking a year and a half down the line. I'm just not. So just getting them feedback, so as everyone has here said, then we could present that to our representatives and to Department of Education, because when I saw that this morning with Chris Doolin, how small school districts are saying, we want you to do a survey now. How is this going to affect your communities? I just think it's important. We've talked many times today about parent input, and I don't have children in the system anymore, but most of our parents work, and this could shift a lot of things for them. That's all. That's all. Dr. Moore, any final comments?
I think the board needs to clarify, if the board is choosing to advocate our legislators for a shift in time, I think that's a conversation, or to advocate to change current law to give us the flexibility to determine, that is a conversation to be had. As it stands now, it is the beginning of the 26-27 school year. And surveying parents regarding options, the various options, is something that we, staff, has looked at and said, all right, if there are districts who are advocating, I'm not sure which specific districts are,
Right.
but there's a number of them, based on your research, that are advocating to change that through the legislative process. I think Ms. Berenborg has referenced that as well.
And when I was at the meeting Thursday for Ms. Berenborg, St. Lucie was starting the process, and with that survey going out to small school districts, I don't know, some may say 8:30 is fine. One last thing I'll say, my daughter-in-law in Texas, their high school started at 8:30, but their practices begin at 6:30. So, high school and sports?
Yep.
50% of the kids, basically. So I don't know. I just want to hear from these parents.
From my perspective, providing an update to the board, absolutely fine. Surveying parents regarding the various start times, because, as you all have said, this is something that is in fact happening. So in terms of saying these are options A and B in terms of being able to shift to the 8:30 high school, 8 o'clock middle school start times, and this is what we intend to do based on the feedback the community provides. Now, if that in turn promotes feedback from the community that we don't want this at all, then that's information the board can have.
Right.
But I don't want to tell the community that we're, do you want this, yes or no? Because the reality is, the answer is yes, you are going to have it, unless there's change in legislation.
I'm not sure I understood what you just said.
I don't want to miscommunicate
I know,
to
I
our
know.
community.
This is the
This
law.
is happening. This is
the
what's
law,
happening.
And this is a law. We know that's what we're going. Now, maybe some of you else have heard a little bit about this, but this is a law, this is where we're going. But just to let them know that, number one, because I don't think they have a clue as far as most parents, because they're not looking to that year. But we've just got to get feedback. If the districts can have local control, what would be your scenario? I'll try to email Senator Grahl and Representative Brackett again, just to let them know. FSBA said, and I'm on the legislative team on FSBA, said, just let your representatives know you're talking about it. I said, okay.
And I will do the same and circle
Okay.
back with the State Association to see if there's any traction or an
okay.
organized effort.
And that thing that just went out for small schools, I'd be interested in seeing
I
that
can
too.
speak with Chris.
Ms. Rosario?
Yeah. Dr. Moore, do you need I think you need to revise this timeline so that we can have a new plan, please? If you can bring it back to us. If you need it to be an action item, it could be an action item as well. But if you can bring it back to us this way, I think as a board, I don't think that we followed up appropriately with you on this as well. So we have to take ownership on that. But there were some clear dates and deadlines in here that have not been adhered to. So I think we need to follow up on that.
No, wholeheartedly, and I think it's just not the presentation that you're holding up, the entire scenario,
Right.
whether there is in fact a movement, whether it's just small districts or other associations. This is the number of districts that are pursuing or desiring a shift in advocating for state statute. We can't control that. and we will probably know within the next month the level of traction that will or will not
Right.
receive. And that'll
Right.
give us a clear timeline that we can create. And at the end of the day, we're going to look at what's established, fulfilling it, and making sure we're going to keep the main thing, while at the same time doing work once and doing it the right way.
Thank
Here's
you.
why I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that because even though we're hoping to have conversation that maybe local control can be returned to us in this particular area, right now, as it stands, we need to keep planning.
Right.
So I don't think that we should stop our planning just in hopes of what a conversation may result in. I think that we should, we need this revised, and we need, you know, what you all are going to do to get us to the end game. And the other thing that I was going to mention is we keep talking about by 2026, but many districts have made their changes already. So it's by that date, not as of that date. We can make these changes tomorrow if we, you know, had all the information. So I just want to make that clear for the public as well, that the deadline is July 1st of 2026, but we can make those changes anytime before that deadline.
Yeah, and those districts are going to feel really odd if it switches and they made that change that no one really wanted.
And
Well,
Doc-
a lot of board members that I've spoken to who already made the change, and in our last FSBA session, there was, it might have been the June one that I went to, the June or July, the summer one that I went to, there was a session on time changes, and it was very helpful. And the panel that presented were all school board members who actually made those changes, and superintendents as well, who said it's working great. It works out fine for them, and they actually like it. So I think, you know, there's a part where people can be worrisome about these changes, but then I think on the other hand, we've got to look at the positives. I mean, what if it works out great, and it turns out to be something we didn't expect?
Last, any other comments? I just want to say, how was your interview in Washington, D.C.?
It was a very cold but fun experience to have the opportunity at a national stage to
Yeah.
tell Indian River County's story of success. So
Right.
my sole intent was to go there and brag about the transformation, I'm using that word intentionally, of our school system, highlighting that we are the one district, and I've said this at board meetings multiple times, that has seen drastic improvements in our outcomes over the course of the last 5 years. And it is the process that we follow, and that if Indian River County can serve as a beacon of hope for all other counties on how to engage in public education and have meaningful conversation that is respectful of everybody's diverse ways of thinking, to create public education for its community, advocating down to the community, listening and creating that school system, that would be great too. But I just had a great time,
Good.
left extremely proud of being able to tell our community story.
And is the winner announced in March? Did you-
March, yes,
Okay.
March. So
Okay.
we'll just forget about it like it ever happened and just move on to it.
Board members, anything else? Ms.
Yeah,
Bear? I'm sorry.
Yes, Dr. Jones,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
had an item.
Oh, I thought Dr. Moore said you were taking that off. Did you,
What?
do you have an item, Ms. Berenberg? I'm sorry.
I have the Cleveland Clinic agreements, and what I want to say about that is I've been in touch with the CEO that is current CEO of Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Rothman. And out of respect to the negotiations that are going on between his team and Bruce's team, I'm going to hold this off till next month. But I want to bring up a concern and something positive that happened from my experience with this. And so I'm going to wait 1 month
Okay.
and bring it up at the next workshop.
Thank you. My apologies. Ms. Rosario?
I was just going to talk about Dr. Moore's experience, and I hope that, obviously, I hope that you do get it, because that would be pretty neat. And we don't get to hear the interviews with all of the candidates that were there. But I will say it brought me to really think about something that I had been thinking about all along, which is the point of meritocracy, right? The work that you put into something would be the work that you get out of it. And clearly, there's been a lot of work that you've put into this position, moving our district forward. And having a merit-based system, this is a perfect example of, I'm going to assume that you won, hopefully. It would be based on merit, right? All of the things that you have done, all the things to get you to this particular place. And I would like us as a district to start thinking about what it looks like to be in a merit-based system. Not just for, from the human resources perspective of hiring those who are most qualified, because clearly you were the most qualified of all of the panelists in this contest. But from the standpoint of a classroom, perspective, like I started thinking, how does that work for students, right? How would it, in the classroom experience, benefit the student to learn what it means to be in a merit-based system, where you're working hard to accomplish, and at the end of that working hard process, there is something that is a benefit for that student. I love that. I love that idea. I think our entire system should be merit-based. I'd love to see that a part of somehow woven into our strategic plan moving forward. I know that we say that we only hire the best and that are the most qualified, but at the same time, I would like to see us memorialize that somehow. If we can just start thinking about what that would look like ultimately as a system, not just from the district and district standpoint, but from the school-based. Even in sports, it really affects sports too, because the students who work hard on the field, they get to reap the benefits and the rewards on the other end. And that's really all about merit-based system, I think, anyway.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to adjourn this. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, I was just going to say, I think that the workshop today, I'm excited about what's going on in the school system. I think that this Indian River School District is on the verge of really doing something great, not only in Florida, but really being a beacon. The idea of transforming the school district and coming up with all the innovative ideas to drive us to the future, to be competitive, I think is really exciting. And I really can't wait to get back into things that matter in education and get this strategic plan into the strategic plan and actually watch you guys execute it over the next few years, because I think it's an exciting time for all of us. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you, board members, everyone. Adjourn 2:52.